Chapter 1282. In the face of so many Blood Shadow clones, Long Yu didn't retreat. Instead, he charged forward, Berserker runes shining all over his body. Although his compatibility with the Berserker runes was only at the 6th level, the Berserker celestial body he cultivated was a high-grade, unbounded martial skill, a martial skill that was rarely seen in the human race and demon race. By relying on the Berserker celestial body, Long Yu had forcefully increased the strength of his physical body by several levels. At this moment, coupled with the death aura shrouding his body, the death armor, and other defensive methods, Long Yu was actually able to withstand the impact of the blood-colored shadow doppelganger head-on. Under the effect of the death chi, the impact and explosive power of the blood shadow doppelgangers were reduced by half. Then, they were blocked by the death armor and Warmonger's celestial barrier. As expected, they did not hurt Long Yu at all. The squad leader was shocked by Long Yu's defensive prowess, but he wasn't too surprised. After all, the martial skill he had just used was only an Archean martial skill. Compared to Long Yu's unbounded martial skill, it was still a far cry from it. Even though his cultivation level was one level higher than Long Yu's, he couldn't break Long Yu's Berserker celestial body defense with the endless Blood Shadow clones. Not to mention that Long Yu had the Death Realm body refinement defensive method. As Long Yu sprinted over, the squad leader didn't panic. Instead, he raised his hand, and a pair of blood-colored bells appeared in his hand. Suddenly, he let out a bewitching demonic chime. This bewitching demonic chime was specialized in seducing people's minds, and it could be concentrated into a single beam to attack Long Yu. The bewitching demonic chime attacked and instantly invaded Long Yu's ears. But at this moment, the power of his worldly purity body flashed, and the tyrannical effect of this martial skill directly blocked the bewitching demonic chime. Berserker Fist Cannon. Following that, Long Yu clenched his fist tightly and punched out, instantly smashing into the squad leader's body. This punch caused Long Yu to feel as though he had smashed into a steel wall, and the rebounding force caused his fist to feel a slight pain. Fortunately, the power of this punch was strong enough to send the opponent flying. At the beginning, the dragon breath of the 9 underworlds had already corroded the surface layer of the blood-red armor. Now, the power of the punch had even exploded, causing a crack to appear on the blood-red armor. The squad leader fell heavily to the ground, but Long Yu didn't relax in the slightest because he noticed that the center of the arena seemed to have started to suffuse with a layer of mist. At first, the mist was light red in color. As it slowly rose from the ground, it gradually turned into a deep blood-red color, enveloping the entire center of the arena within it. The mist appeared so quickly that Long Yu didn't even have time to react. At that time, he was too focused on blasting his opponent away. Even if he had noticed it, he wouldn't have been able to disperse the mist. Moreover, Long Yu did not have any means to disperse this fog. This layer of mist seems to be able to block my spiritual perception and enhance the opponent's spiritual perception, speed, and so on. It's a powerful means to weaken the opponent and strengthen myself. Long Yu's heart skipped a beat. He felt that it was difficult for him to detect his opponent's location. Both his spiritual perception and naked eyes were blocked by this layer of blood-red mist. However, Long Yu didn't panic. Instead, he displayed the method of balance control and directly attached a burst of balanced light to himself, enhancing his spiritual perception by 10 times. After all, Long Yu had already cultivated this martial arts secret method of balance control to the peak of the 9th level. With the powerful method of balanced light, Long Yu's spiritual perception was suddenly enhanced by more than 1,000 times. Since the opponent was in front of him at the beginning, there was no need for Long Yu to display balance control. However, now that the opponent wanted to hide, Long Yu certainly wouldn't let him do that. Not only did Long Yu's spiritual senses perception ability increase, allowing him to detect the location of his opponent in an instant, he even had a balance control over his power, concealing his own aura. In this way, the situation on the battlefield was reversed. Originally, in the blood-red mist, it should have been Long Yu who couldn't detect the team leader and the team leader who was hiding. However, The situation was the exact opposite now. It was Long Yu who was hiding, and the team leader who couldn't detect Long Yu. Outside the gladiator arena, many spectators were also confused. Only super powerhouses like Shuel Luo, Red Oriole, and Consort you could clearly see the situation in the arena and know how the situation had changed. The other Emperor-level soldiers on the battlefield had no idea what was happening in the arena. They only saw the blood-red mist floating and then thought of the team leader's unique skill. That kid is in trouble now. Even the blood-red mist has appeared. That kid can be said to be blind. He can't find our team leader at all. That's right. I want to see how that kid can defeat our team leader without his spiritual perception. However, I hope that kid won't lose too badly. After all, he's the man of our clan's princess. If he loses too badly, it won't look good for the princess either. The group of people discussed animatedly, but they didn't know that the situation in the arena was completely the opposite of what they had imagined. Can't you find me? The corners of Long Yu's mouth curled slightly. In the blood-red mist, he could clearly sense the other party's location by relying on balance control and balanced light. However, the team leader couldn't sense Long Yu because Long Yu had concealed all his aura with balance control. How could this be? The team leader was shocked. His blood-red mist was a very powerful technique. In the past, he had always used it to fool his opponents. However, he didn't expect to be fooled by Long Yu now. Fortunately, although he had lost track of Long Yu, he still believed that Long Yu wouldn't be able to find him. Therefore, he was rather relieved. On the other hand, he also had a technique to strengthen his spiritual perception. As long as he used it, he could still find Long Yu again. However, it was obvious that he didn't have time to use that technique. This was because Long Yu's attack had already arrived. The ancient dragon skeleton tower appeared in Long Yu's palm, and Long Yu entered the ancient dragon skeleton tower. Dragon skeleton break. Long Yu activated the ancient dragon skeleton tower, causing it to spin at a high speed. At this moment, it directly swept up the surrounding blood-red mist and condensed it at the top of the tower. In an instant, it charged towards the team leader. The team leader hadn't reacted at all. He was still trying to find traces of Long Yu, but Long Yu's powerful attack had already arrived. Double, triple, quadruple. Long Yu thought to himself. This time, the ancient dragon skeleton pagoda's dragon skeleton break was 4 times stronger than before. As expected of someone who had reached the spirit fusion realm, it was easy for it to unleash a multiplication of strength. This was the strength of an endless level warrior. In fact, the dragon bone burst, which was 4 times more powerful than the void burial, was much more destructive than the void burial. However, this move also had a fatal flaw, which was that it was harder to hit its target. Since it was just a spar, Long Yu didn't want to seriously injure or kill his opponent. Therefore, there was no need to restrain him. Otherwise, if he used the Dragon of the 9 Underworlds intimidation, his opponent would be gravely injured even if he didn't die. Of course, he couldn't rule out the possibility that his opponent might have some life-saving technique. However, Long Yu wouldn't use a trump card like the Dragon of the 9 Underworlds intimidation in a spar anyway. The dragon skeleton break stirred up a storm, and a blood-colored mist swirled around it as it shot toward the team leader. The team leader's eyes were filled with shock. He hadn't expected Long Yu to be able to discover his position in the blood-colored mist. However, he couldn't be bothered to guess how Long Yu had discovered him. The most important thing right now was to block or evade Long Yu's powerful attack. The dragon skeleton break was simply too powerful, and even the team leader was a little afraid. How could a brat who had just stepped into the sovereign's secret realm be able to use such a technique? In truth, this was the team leader's first time seeing such a powerful lower-level sovereign. His opponent wasn't any weaker than a mid-level sovereign realm veteran like him. No wonder the princess had taken a liking to this man. While he was thinking in his heart, his hands didn't slow down at all. He knew that the pair of blood-colored bells in his hands were useless against Long Yu. So he put them away and took out a long blood-red rod from his bosom. As soon as the staff appeared, it instantly became thicker and longer. Then, it smashed down towards the rapidly approaching ancient dragon skeleton tower. The power of the blood-red divine characters covered the staff in a thick layer, and actually brought about a whirlwind. With a bang, it smashed into the ancient dragon skeleton tower. This was the first time the dragon skeleton tower had been hit head-on while using the dragon skeleton break. What surprised Long Yu was that the opponent's rod actually contained boundless power, and it actually stopped the dragon skeleton tower's forward momentum. So powerful? What kind of rod is this? Long Yu was dumbfounded. Only now did he realize that the opponent's rod was actually of the divine grade absolute beginning rank. A divine grade absolute beginning rank was originally rare, but now that Long Yu's level was different, and he had proposed a challenge, Shui Luo obviously had to find someone stronger for him to deal with. Otherwise, how could there be any suspense? To Long Yu, challenging someone above his level was already a common occurrence. If this middle-level sovereign wasn't strong, there was no way he could give Long Yu any pressure. Therefore, Shui Luo intentionally chose a team leader with a divine grade absolute beginning rank to fight against Long Yu. Although this team leader had only awakened his divine grade absolute beginning rank rod to the 6th level, it was definitely more than enough to fight against Long Yu, who had just stepped into the sovereign secret realm. Since that's the case, let's launch a sneak attack first. Long Yu took advantage of the clash between his ancient dragon skeleton pagoda and the other party's godly primordium bloodstaff. Without thinking, he activated his Dantian. A layer of light blue water flowed continuously on his hands, before turning into 2 light blue spatial blades. Chapter 1283. Duankong's Sacred Spring, Void-Rending Blow, was one of Long Yu's most powerful sneak attacks. He could use the Duankong's Sacred Spring to form a spatial blade, appear inside the opponent's body, and directly attack them from the inside. This was especially true after Long Yu cultivated the Void-Rending Blow to its peak. The Duankong's Sacred Spring could actively search for weaknesses inside the opponent's body. If the opponent was weaker, it could kill them in an instant. At this moment, Long Yu used the Void-Rending Blow. The Duankong's Sacred Spring battle weapon turned into a spatial blade. It instantly broke into the squad leader's body and found the location of the opponent's Yao core. Just as he was about to destroy the opponent's Yao core, the squad leader sensed that something was wrong. He immediately let out a roar, and a pair of blood-red wings spread out from his back. When a blood demon transformed into their true form, the strength of their physical body would increase significantly. The blood-red wings could also strengthen their physical body's recovery ability. At this moment, the squad leader spread his wings and flew into the air. Blood-red divine symbols rapidly condensed in the Yao core, forcing out the 2 spatial blades that the Duankong's Sacred Spring had turned into. It didn't work. Long Yu felt that it was a pity. It seemed that the Void-Rending Blow was indeed too low-end. It was only a top-grade archaic-level technique, not an unbounded one. Its effect was much weaker. It might be effective against the human race, but it wouldn't be effective against the demon race. Although Long Yu thought this, his hands didn't stop moving. He had already activated the Void Nether Dragon Blade and flew out. Water-type primordial power spread out and lingered on the battlefield. In the next moment, boundless water-type primordial power surrounded the squad leader. Void-Rending Blow was about to be used. This move wouldn't be very effective against a demigod mirror clone at the same level as Long Yu. However, the squad leader he was facing was not a demigod mirror clone, so it couldn't be that strong. Therefore, once Void Burial was activated, even if the other party didn't die, they would still be severely injured. The squad leader also sensed the power of this move and was extremely vigilant. Most importantly, he was shocked that Long Yu was actually able to use the power of the 5 elements. This was something that not even some sovereigns could do. The team leader did not give up. Instead, he began to wave the blood-colored staff in his hand. It was the divine grade absolute beginning weapon that he had awakened to the 6th level. Bloody Rod Dance. The captain shouted fiercely as the blood-red wings on his back flapped incessantly and condensed blood-red divine markings on the divine grade absolute beginning rod. After that, he waved the blood-red rod in his hand and actually created a blood-red whirlwind that swept towards the surroundings. The terrifying blood-colored storm swept across the entire area. It even managed to disperse the water absolute beginning power. Although it couldn't destroy it completely, it stopped the void burial from activating. This surprised Longyu. He didn't expect the awakened divine grade absolute beginning weapon to be so powerful. Looks like I have to quickly awaken Little Void as well. As a divine grade absolute beginning weapon, only awakening it can maximize its power. The unparalleled compatibility from before doesn't seem to be enough anymore, Longyu thought to himself. He didn't give up and continued to let Little Void use Void Burial. Meanwhile, he himself was covered in divine markings of the Berserker attribute. He raised his fist and flew towards the squad captain. Surrounded by the water absolute beginning power, the squad captain used all his strength to deal with the Netherworld Dragon Blade. However, he didn't expect that the Netherworld Dragon Blade and Longyu's consciousness were completely different. They could split up and attack him together. Caught off guard, the squad captain was punched in the back by Longyu. His entire body froze for a moment. Then, he subconsciously spread his wings, and a blood-red whirlwind rushed towards Longyu. Berserker Fist Cannon. Longyu didn't care about the opponent's attack at all. He raised his fist and continued to punch. The power of the Berserker attribute kept gathering in his hand, and then he released it. He punched the back of the squad captain again and again. When Yulong's entire body was blown away by his opponent's blood-red storm, his opponent had already received 7 or 8 punches from Yulong's back. The Berserker's divine runes had practically torn off his opponent's blood-red wings. At this moment, the opponent's mind was still focused on the Void Spirit Dragon Blade, because Little Void was gathering water absolute beginning power to activate Void Burial. If he did not stop it, it would be able to kill the squad leader with a single move. It was also thanks to these 7 or 8 punches that Longyu suddenly felt his heart become clear, and the Berserker God runes all over his body seemed to have become even denser. However, he quickly discovered that this was just an illusion. The reason why he had such an illusion was because his Berserker Heavenly Body realm had increased. Berserker Celestial Body was an upper unbounded rank martial skill. Unbounded rank martial skills were already very rare, and this was an upper unbounded rank martial skill. Only the Bone Race and the Vestigial Race could obtain such a martial skill. Previously, when Longyu had cultivated it to the large success stage, he could use the Berserker Fist Cannon and the Berserker Defensive Barrier. But now, after the 7 or 8 punches just now, as well as the power of the blood-colored storm that was constantly sweeping out, Longyu had finally comprehended this move to the peak realm. The Berserker attribute began to condense a faint aura around his body. This aura gave Longyu a feeling of I am Berserker. At the same time, due to the improvement of the Berserker's celestial body, the strength of Longyu's body was enhanced. His flesh, blood, tendons, and bones became more solid. Roughly speaking, Longyu's physical strength had increased by at least 3 times. This made Longyu laugh out loud. The improvement of his physical strength made his survivability stronger, and he could use Berserker Celestial Body more at ease. I really hope this martial skill can be improved to the Great Accomplishment realm. If that's the case, to what extent will my physical strength be enhanced? Longyu thought to himself, but he did not bite off more than he could chew. Now that he had cultivated Berserker Celestial Body to the peak, he had derived a method called Berserker Heavenly Power. When he activated the Berserker attribute, Berserker Heavenly Power would naturally condense around Longyu's body. Berserker Heavenly Power could be accumulated layer by layer, and it could be stacked without limit. Every time it was stacked, it could double the power of Longyu's Berserker attribute. This was a move that had unlimited power. Berserker Heavenly Power. Let me try. Longyu made up his mind. He glanced at the team leader who was still entangled with the Void Spirit Dragon Blade, condensed the Berserker attribute again, and rushed towards the other party. Just now, he was sent flying by the other party's blood-colored storm, but now that his physical strength had increased by at least 3 times, He was not affected in the slightest when he barged into the other party's blood-colored storm. Then, Long Yu continued to swing his fist and smashed it over. Berserker fist cannon punch after punch. With every punch that landed on the other party's back, the Berserker heavenly power around Long Yu could be stacked by one more layer. Very soon it was stacked to 3, 4, 5. Long Yu punched out one punch after another, and each punch was more powerful than the last. The effect of Berserker heavenly power was fully displayed by him. The blood-colored storm could not stop Long Yu's punches, and the team leader finally could not hold on any longer. Fortunately, his physical body was strong, and after spreading his wings, he could increase his physical body's recovery speed, so he could hold on for the time being. However, if this were to continue, even if he possessed the 6th awakened level absolute beginning divine grade blood staff, he would definitely not be able to withstand Long Yu's attacks. Isn't this divine absolute beginning staff too strange? The team leader became more and more frustrated as he fought. If it was not for the Void Spirit Dragon Blade, he would be able to get rid of Long Yu's punches in a matter of minutes. Now, however, he could only focus most of his energy on dealing with the Void Spirit Dragon Blade. He could feel that if he allowed the divine absolute beginning staff to use that powerful move, he would die. He had already used all the skills of a level 6 divine absolute beginning staff, but he still could not get rid of the Void Spirit Dragon Blade. Although the Void Spirit Dragon Blade had not awakened yet, it was an unparalleled weapon with Long Yu. Moreover, it was a super weapon that had been smelted by the absolute beginning furnace. Of course, it was stronger than the opponent's divine absolute beginning staff. The situation on the battlefield became complicated and confusing. The many army warriors around the arena all held their breaths as they stared at the center of the arena. All of them were stunned by the scene before them. The red mist that had engulfed the entire arena had already disappeared. Everyone could now see the current situation in the arena. The squad captain was being held back by the Void Nether Dragon Blade's water element power, while Long Yu was constantly bombarding the squad captain with his fists. Moreover, the destructive power of each punch seemed to be stronger than the last. Before long, Berserker Heavenly Power finally stacked to level 10. A casual Berserker fist from Long Yu is now 10 times more powerful than the first punch. The Berserker Heavenly Power was indeed an effect that could only be derived from an upper, unending level martial skill. It was truly shocking. Long Yu was covered in Berserker Divine runes and bathed in the radiance of the Berserker Heavenly Power. The pressure he exerted on the team leader grew stronger and stronger. Soon, the team leader could not take it anymore. What kind of technique is this? Each punch is stronger than the last. If I let him continue, won't I lose for sure? It looks like an unending level martial skill, but how did this kid get it? The team leader thought to himself. He clenched his teeth and endured Long Yu's attacks. At first, Long Yu's attacks did not hurt him at all. He used all his strength to resist the Void Spirit Dragon Blade. But now, as the Berserker Heavenly Power stacked, Long Yu's punches became more and more powerful. Moreover, they were multiplying. This situation made the team leader panic. He really did not know how to deal with it. The Void Spirit Dragon Blade was clearly a battle weapon with its own consciousness. But wasn't it a divine grade absolute beginning weapon? Only a divine grade absolute beginning weapon that had awakened to level 12 could have its own consciousness. But this, the team leader's thoughts were in a mess. He could not understand the existence of the Void Spirit Dragon Blade, nor could he see what was going on with Long Yu's Berserker Heavenly Power. Chapter 1284. When the captain of the Blood Demon clan on the battlefield was in a state of confusion, it meant that he was starting to feel weak. On the other hand, Long Yu's aura was like the sun at high noon. The levels of Fighting Heaven's power were still stacking up. Finally, it reached the point where the squad leader sensed an abnormal threat. He no longer paid attention to the Nether Void Dragon Blade and swung the blood-colored staff in his hand. The blood-red divine symbols condensed into countless shadows of the staff and attacked Long Yu's head. Long Yu laughed aloud. He raised his fist, and accompanied by the violent aura of heavenly berserker momentum, punched out. After 2 punches, not only did the opponent's blood-red staff of the divine grade absolute beginning grade be blown back, but he also added 2 layers of heavenly berserker momentum to it, which boosted the power of his berserker divine symbols again. Also, at this time, since the opponent was no longer paying attention to the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger, the Water Absolute beginning grade force was finally condensed. Void Burial, the strongest skill that Little Void could perform, finally broke out. At this moment, Long Yu directly ran into the internal space of the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger. The outbreak of Void Burial immediately filled the entire arena. The toughness of the ultimate beginning force of the water element caught the captain of the Blood Demon clan off guard. His entire body was surrounded by the burial void. He only had enough time to wave the blood-red rod in his hand and construct a blood-red defensive barrier, trying to resist the power of the burial void. However, it was impossible to resist the current void burial with only the level 6 awakened level absolute beginning grade blood-red staff. The blood-red defensive barrier only lasted for 2 breaths before it was completely crushed by the endless water absolute beginning grade vortex. Then, the captain of the Blood Demon clan was also sucked into the vortex. In the spectator's stand, Shui Luo stood up immediately. He finally raised his hand. A thick stream of blood-red divine symbols condensed into a blood-red whirlwind and swept into the arena. Long Yu, who was within the Nether Dragon Blade, quickly came to the side to watch. He knew that Shui Luo was going to save the squad leader. Although this void burial might not be able to kill the squad leader completely, it would definitely be able to heavily injure him. After all, it was just a spar. Shui Luo couldn't bear to see Long Yu or any of his squad leaders get seriously injured in a spar. There was no need for that. As for the outcome, it was obvious. Even if Shui Luo were to make a move now, his subordinates wouldn't say anything. The destructive power of the void burial was something that everyone could feel. Very soon, with Shui Luo's help, the void burial was finally dispersed by the bloody whirlwind, and the squad leader of the Blood Demon clan was slightly injured by the void burial. The surface of his blood-red battle soldier armor had already been corroded by the dragon breath of the 9 underworlds. Just now, Long Yu had unleashed more than 10 punches with his berserk heavenly momentum. It was already on the verge of collapse. At this moment, after being twisted by the void burial, the blood-red armor on his body was completely shattered. His blood-red wings were curled up. Only the absolute beginning divine grade blood-red long stick in his hand was still intact. He held it in his hand and kept condensing blood-red divine symbols to resist the void burial. It was obvious that if Shui Luo hadn't dispelled the void burial, the squad leader would have been seriously injured. I've lost. With Shui Luo's move, the result of the spar was decided. The squad leader of the Blood Demon clan didn't say anything else. He simply admitted the fact, got up, and left. Okay. Long Yu nodded his head. He was quite respectful towards his opponent. A loss was a loss. There was no need for him to deny it. In front of so many people, being able to calmly admit his loss was also a form of courage. Shui Luo's subordinate was indeed a good man. He wasn't like the 3rd prince of the Golden Dragon Demon clan, who acted as if he was the most important person in the world. When the squad leader admitted his loss, thousands of soldiers of the Blood Demon clan's army who came to the arena to watch the battle looked at Long Yu with admiration. Originally, they didn't think highly of Long Yu. They thought that he was only able to make contributions on the battlefield because of Red Oriole's support and luck. But now, it seemed that Long Yu's contributions were not a coincidence. Not to mention that he was able to challenge those at a higher level than him and win. The aura he displayed during the battle had left a deep impression on everyone present. This was especially true when he displayed the Berserker heavenly power at the end. As the layers of power stacked on top of each other, even some of the higher Sovereign Realm captains and deputy commanders in the Sovereign Realm couldn't help but feel apprehensive. This kind of technique was too strong. No one knew what kind of martial technique it was. Moreover, Everyone knew that Imperial Dragon mainly cultivated and comprehended Shadow Attribute Divine Runes and Space Attribute Divine Runes. But now, it seemed that even the Berserker Attribute Divine Rune was so fierce. This was something that everyone couldn't help but admire. One had to know that it was already very impressive for an ordinary cultivator to cultivate a single type of divine character, not to mention someone like Long Yu, who cultivated 3 types of divine characters at the same time. Moreover, he could use the water element origin energy. They had never heard of anyone who had just broken through to the sovereign secret realm being able to use the power of the 5 elements origin energy. No matter what, Long Yu had won the battle without any suspense. Shuai Luo's subordinates had nothing to say. Your strength has really improved by leaps and bounds in a short period of time. Impressive, impressive. Red Oriole flew over to Long Yu, her beautiful eyes flashing with a bright light. She still remembered that Long Yu had faced more than 10 lower and upper sovereigns on White Feather Planet. At the time, he had needed to borrow all the power of the 4 ancient palaces in order to kill those sovereigns. But now, if Long Yu would be surrounded by more than 10 sovereigns, he wouldn't even need to use any other power. Just the ancient Dragonbone Pagoda and the Nether Void Dragon Blade would be enough to eliminate them one by one. And it had only been 2 months since then. To most cultivators, 2 months wouldn't be able to increase their strength by much. However, Long Yu had risen from the 5-star Emperor realm to the 6-star Emperor realm, then the 7-star Emperor realm, and finally the Sovereign Secret realm. This speed was simply indescribably shocking. But Long Yu knew that all of this was because of the Nether Void Dragon Blade. Otherwise, there was no way he could have broken through to the Sovereign Secret realm so quickly. From Consort Yu, he knew that all the core members of the 9 Nether tribe could completely absorb the energy of elixirs or other cultivation resources. It was because of this ability that the 9 Nether tribe was able to develop from a small tribe in the 9 Nether realm to its current position of dominating an entire galaxy. You're also a great sovereign, but you're still much stronger than me. I want to catch up to you as soon as possible. Long Yu said to Red Oriole with a smile. You want to catch up to me? Big sister, I'm waiting. Red Oriole giggled. It's getting late. Let's go eat something to celebrate. We've both encountered 3 demigod races. It can be said that we've escaped from death. We're lucky to be able to come back. Long Yu nodded in agreement. Although he had played some tricks, he would have been smashed into pieces if anything had gone wrong when he was faced with the 3 demigod aliens. He really relied on luck in many aspects. After the sparring ended, everyone gradually dispersed. From then on, rumors of Long Yu's deeds spread throughout the Emperor's army under Shuai Luo's command. Long Yu didn't have the time to pay attention to them. That night, after a celebration, everyone went back to their own homes. During the celebration, Long Yu gave the Sword of Pride light that he had obtained from Baiyu Tegu Yixian, as well as some of the other spoils he had obtained during the battle against the demigods, which he distributed to friends in need. The Sword of Proud Radiance was a mid-unendurable martial technique he had acquired from one of the leaders of the Ascetic Walker League, Baiyu. It was definitely a top-notch sword technique, and coupled with the 2 secret magics he had acquired from the White Feather Demon clan, it was easy to imagine how powerful Gu Yixin would become, without a doubt, the most powerful person from the Netherworld realm. Of course, Long Yu was an exception. As for the others, such as Finyu Exen, Lu Yuan, Shi Yin Wu, and a few others, they had also obtained many things. Moreover, they had been training all this time, so whether it was in terms of martial realm or battle experience, they were much stronger than before. Everyone was getting stronger, and no one had lost their lives. At most, some of them had been seriously injured, but they recovered after taking some medicinal pellets that Liao Lele had refined. Everything was progressing very smoothly. Long Yu felt the same. However, there was still a knot in his heart, and that was regarding his father. After returning from the ancient era's ruins, it was about time to go and find Long Zaiqian and see how he was doing. After the celebration, Long Yu returned with Red Oriole. The 2 of them still had a lot of things to do tonight. First of all, Long Yu had to move the new martial world from Red Oriole's little world into his own little world. The bone race and the vestigial race that were temporarily in Red Oriol's little world had to be moved back as well. After all, it was Long Yu who was negotiating with the survivors of the bone race. It was better for them to live in Long Yu's small world. Now that Long Yu had reached the sovereign mystic realm, he was an invincible existence to the survivors of the bone race. Let's take care of these things first. After that, we still have to explore the remains of the demigod expert's small world. Later in the night, we'll all come together, and it'll be up to us to find what we find. Red Oriole and Long Yu were also looking forward to it. However, it didn't have much time. Even if the two of them spent the whole night searching, they wouldn't be able to search through the remains of the demigod expert's small world. Chapter 1285. Anyone would be interested in the remains of a demigod's small world. Now that Long Yu had obtained the remains of a demigod's small world, he had actually obtained the world mark. However, the world mark was actually a piece of ice that had been cut in half. The ice was cut in half, but it didn't melt. After all, it was something formed by the fusion of ice attribute divine characters, so it couldn't be destroyed so easily. Moreover, it was the remains of a demigod's small world. Therefore, the remains of a demigod's small world were also divided into two parts. As for what was in each part, no one knew. Long Yu and Red Oriole didn't know either. They planned to explore half of it together and let the others explore the other half. That night, Red Oriole communicated with Long Yu first. She moved the members of the new martial world, the bone race, and the remnant race from Long Yu's small world to Long Yu's new small world. Long Yu had already stepped into the ruler's mysterious realm and had his own small world. Of course, he didn't need to borrow Red Oriole's small world anymore. Otherwise, it would be a burden for Red Oriole. In a new martial world, there were hundreds of billions of martial cultivators and demonic cultivators gathered together. How much spiritual energy would it take to cultivate and survive? The bone race and the remnant race might not be able to bear it anymore. After all, Red Oriole hadn't provided them with much spiritual energy before. Fortunately, now that Long Yu had broken through to the ruler's mysterious realm, his small world was finally formed. These creatures could live safely in his small world. The new martial world was originally a system of the alliance of 5 emperors. It was led by Emperor Yun, one of the 5 emperors. Recently, there hadn't been any trouble. Instead, there were many talented martial cultivators and demonic cultivators emerging throughout the continent. They were all recruited into the alliance of 5 emperors for training. If these geniuses' battle awareness and cultivation talent were strong enough, Emperor Yun would recommend them to Long Yu or Red Oriole to train outside. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had at least reached the level of a 1-star emperor. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive in the 3rd galaxy. There was also a special place in the new martial world. It was the place where the white feather monsters lived. The father and son, Qing Feng and Tian Lei, lived in a new martial world with more than 100,000 tribes of the white feather monsters. They wouldn't be disturbed by outsiders. If they wanted, they could go to other places in the new martial world to train. As the white feather monsters clan had 2 great sovereigns, one was Tian Lei, and the other was an elder, their overall status in the new martial world could be said to be unshakable. There was no need to worry about being bullied. Furthermore, Tian Lei would definitely not allow his clansmen to bully others in the new martial world. Therefore, in the new martial world, the 100,000 tribes of the white feather monsters didn't interfere with other people's business. They developed on their own in peace. After all, the most important thing for the 100,000 white feather monsters wasn't to become stronger, but to survive. They had to ensure the living environment of their clansmen. Now, the new martial world had finally returned to Long Yu's small world. Long Yu finally had 2 great sovereign experts in his body. There were also dozens of other sovereign experts in the white feather monster's secret realm. They were all members of the white feather monster's tribes. The combined strength of these people definitely surpassed Long Yu's. If he encountered danger, he could consider letting them come out to help. In addition to the new martial world, there was also the region where the Bone Race and the Vestigial Clan were. The Bone Race and the Vestigial Clan had 300,000 tribes. Yu Wufang was in charge of communicating with them. Since Red Oriole didn't provide them with any worldly spiritual qi, they hadn't developed much recently. As soon as Long Yu moved them into his small world, he began to provide them with worldly spiritual qi. Although the generation of worldly spiritual qi in Long Yu's small world was slow, he estimated that it was just enough for all the living beings to cultivate inside. In this way, Long Yu's small world had a total of 100 billion martial and demonic cultivators, 100,000 white feather monsters, and 300,000 Bone Race and Vestigial Clan living inside. Of course, there were also the 100 billion Ice God Clan captives, which weren't under Long Yu's jurisdiction. In order to provide worldly spiritual qi to the martial and demonic cultivators of the new martial world, as well as the Bone Race and Vestigial Clan, Long Yu's small world's worldly spiritual qi had almost been exhausted. It could be said that it was in a state of equilibrium. If he wanted to take care of the Ice God Clan captives, the entire small world would collapse. After all, Long Yu is only a lower sovereign. The regeneration speed of the worldly spiritual qi in the small world wasn't that fast. It wasn't as strong as Red Oriole and Consort Yu's, which could accommodate trillions of living beings to reproduce and cultivate inside. Even Red Oriole had trillions of living beings in her small world. Together, they strengthened her world power. This was also an important method to increase one's strength after entering the sovereign mystic realm. As long as my martial cultivation realm increases, the rate at which the worldly spiritual qi is produced will increase. More living beings can enter the small world to reproduce and live inside, increasing my world power. Long Yu had some understanding of the increase in strength during the sovereign mystic realm. In addition to the increase in basic strength, the increase in world power could also increase the combat strength of a sovereign mystic realm expert. Not to mention, now that Long Yu's small world had 100 billion martial and demonic cultivators of a new martial world, his world power had more than doubled. Originally, the world power could only increase Long Yu's combat strength by about 10%, but now it had increased to 20%. This caused Long Yu's overall strength to increase by a lot. If I can obtain enough worldly spiritual qi to support the 100 billion Ice God Clan captives, my world power will increase by another 10%. It was a pity that the worldly spiritual qi in Long Yu's small world was completely insufficient. Even if it was sufficient, he would have to consider upgrading his Devil Dust Heart martial arts secret technique. The amount of heaven and earth spiritual qi needed to upgrade this martial arts secret technique was simply too huge. But now that he had the worldly spiritual qi in his small world, Long Yu didn't need to consume medicinal pills to replenish the worldly spiritual qi. He just needed to control the amount of worldly spiritual qi in his small world. After half a night, Long Yu's small world finally settled down. The Bone Race, Remnant Clan, New Martial World, and Ice God Clan captives were all in different positions. Although the Ice God Clan captives were in a mess, it wouldn't affect other places anyway. Long Yu didn't bother to pay attention to them. If there was a need, he could directly absorb all the power of the Ice God Clan captives. It didn't matter even if all the Ice God Clan captives died. Long Yu wouldn't show any mercy to those from the Ice God Clan, because he was very clear that if the cultivators of the Human Clan and the Demon Clan were to fall into the hands of the Ice God Clan's experts, they would suffer the same fate. If you want to increase the rate at which the worldly spiritual qi is produced in your small world, there's another way besides improving your martial arts realm. After hearing Long Yu explain his situation, Red Oriole smiled and said, "This method is to find some natural treasures and place them in your small world. These natural treasures are called holy spirit sources. The quality varies from low to high, and the effects are very different. However, they're all very valuable. You can search the battlefield merit exchange list to see." Long Yu nodded when he heard this. He still had 5 million battlefield merit that he hadn't used yet. He had originally planned on saving it for a critical moment, but now that Red Warbler had mentioned it, he didn't mind searching through the exchange list. The Holy Spirit Source was a magical substance that constantly produced worldly spiritual chi. However, it could only take effect after combining with the World Imprint. Long Yu opened the list of items that could be exchanged for battlefield merit points and began searching for information about the Holy Spirit Source. This list was recorded in the Jade Slip he had obtained from the battlecruiser Fortress. It was possible that the items he was interested in were no longer available, but it didn't matter. He just wanted to use it as a reference for the time being. Soon, the list appeared before his eyes. The Holy Spirit Source is indeed divided into low, medium, and high grades. However, isn't the difference a little too big? Long Yu was dumbfounded just by looking at it. There is only one high-grade Holy Spirit Source in the entire battlecruiser Fortress warehouse. If combined with the World Imprint, it could increase the rate at which worldly spiritual chi was produced in the small world by 10 times. Just this alone, if converted into an increase in overall strength, would be equivalent to increasing Long Yu's combat strength by several times. Unfortunately, there was only one such high-grade Holy Spirit Source in the entire battlecruiser Fortress warehouse, and the exchange requirement was as high as 10 million battlefield merit points. Even Long Yu could only look at it in awe. If he hadn't used the 5 million battlefield merit points to exchange for the green jade sulfur stone, he would have been able to exchange for the Holy Spirit Source. However, after thinking about it carefully, he realized that it wasn't necessary. The medium-grade Holy Spirit Source is worth about 1 million battlefield merit points, but it can only increase the rate at which worldly spiritual chi is produced in the small world by 50%. Long Yu checked and found that it was naturally not as cost-effective as the high-grade Holy Spirit Source. The same amount of merit points, but the effect was halved. There was no need to exchange for the medium-grade Holy Spirit Source. As for the low-grade Holy Spirit Source, there was even less of a need to consider. It could only increase the recovery rate of worldly spiritual chi by 1 to 2%. It was basically useless. It seems that if I want the Holy Spirit Source, I'll still have to accumulate 10 million battlefield merit points. Long Yu thought to himself. Then, he shook his head and temporarily threw the matter to the back of his mind. Next, it was almost time to explore the remains of the demigod expert's small world. Red Oriole had invited a lot of people over, and it was almost midnight now. Long Yu was rather looking forward to it. After all, it was the remains of the demigod expert's small world. Chapter 1286. Landslide and Dragon Wing. The two demigod experts of the Demon Clan gave the remains of the small world that had been split in half to Long Yu as a reward. The world imprint of the fragment was a piece of ice that had been split in half. It was unknown what material it was made of, but it was extremely sturdy. In any case, to Long Yu or Red Oriole, it could be said to be an indestructible existence. Only powerhouses at the level of Landslide and Dragon Wings had the ability to shatter the world imprint of this small world fragment. At midnight, Man Exen, Chila, Mayor, Fiexen, Xiyingwu, and so on, more than 20 people all came to Red Oriole's residence. Red Oriole had invited them during the day. These two pieces of ice are both the remains of a demigod's small world. I didn't tell you about them during the day. Now you can explore them. If you find anything, it's all yours. Red Oriole and Long Yu said to them together. Everybody was shocked. Even Gu Yixian, who had been calm the whole time, was stunned. They didn't expect that there would be such a good thing waiting for them when Red Oriole asked them to come in the middle of the night. The remains of a demigod's small world. What did that mean? Not just for them. It was definitely a precious treasure even for demigods and human demigods. After all, there were only a few demigods in a race. Besides, if they wanted to slay a demigod and take away the remains of his small world, it was safe to say that the mark of the remains of the small world of the demigod expert of the Ice God clan was definitely something that could only be found once in thousands of years. Now it was right in front of them, waiting to be explored. What could be in the remains of a small world? Anything was possible, especially when it was the remains of a demigod's small world. Even a random sovereign realm cultivator's world imprint could contain anything, be it battle weapons, cultivation resources, creations, martial technique jade slips, or anything else. Besides, it was the remains of a demigod's small world. Even if there were some absolute beginning divine treasures stored inside, it wouldn't be too surprising. Simply put, it was filled with treasures, especially to cultivators at the level of Man Xen, Chihua, Gu Yixian, and the others. The things that many demigods were not interested in were absolute treasures for them. Besides, it was something that even demigods kept in their small worlds. Of course, there are many opportunities, but there are also dangers. It is very possible that there are some powerful ice gods in the demigod small world. You have to be careful. Long Yu said solemnly, but you don't have to worry. All the living beings that have reached the sovereign secret realm have already been killed by the demigod seniors of the demon race. So, with your cultivation realm, as long as you act carefully and don't provoke the native ice god clan, you won't be in any danger. Red Oriole continued. Everyone nodded, engraving Red Oriole's words in their hearts. Actually, everyone understood that there would definitely be continents like the Shunwu world and the remains of demigod small worlds, and there would definitely be many ice gods on those continents. As long as they didn't provoke the ice gods, they wouldn't be much of a threat. All right, let's go. The remains of this small world are relatively large, so you can search for a while longer. But by the time you wake up, Red Oriole and I will have already left. Long Yu said with a smile. Half a night was definitely not enough for them to search half of the remains of a demigod small world, but it was more than enough for Long Yu and Red Oriole. After Long Yu and Red Oriole finished searching the remains of this small world, they would follow Consort Yu and Shui Luo to explore the ancient alien ruins. As for Gu Yixian, Man Xian, and Chihua, they would continue searching the remains of the small world. If nothing unexpected happened, by the time Long Yu and Red Oriole returned from the ancient alien ruins, everyone's overall combat ability would definitely be greatly improved. After all, no matter what, they had all searched the remains of a demigod's small world. They would more or less have some precious rewards that would definitely be able to greatly improve their strength. Brother Long, you must be careful when you go to the ancient alien ruins. I heard that even great sovereigns might encounter misfortune in there. Fengyu Xian said to Long Yu with a bit of worry. Long Yu had always been very fond of this little girl, but he hadn't paid attention to her for a long time. Looking at her now, as she grew older, she had become even more slender and graceful. I'll be careful. Long Yu nodded and said solemnly. The others also gave their blessings to Long Yu and Red Oriole. Their concern was obvious. However, many things had already been said at the banquet, so there was no need to say too much now. After some small talk, everyone prepared to start exploring the remains of the demigod's small world. I'll stand guard outside first. When it's about time, 2 of you will come out and take my shift, Gu Yixian said to the others. The others nodded. Indeed, if they wanted to enter the remains of a demigod's small world to explore, it would be impossible to enter without someone guarding outside. Little Sue, you stay outside and keep watch as well. We need to search the remains of the small world one by one. We can't travel through the void so quickly. Long Yu also smiled at the void nether dragon blade. Little Sue, of course, was extremely obedient and stayed outside with Gu Yixian. Then, Long Yu and Red Oriole looked at each other and entered the remains of the small world on one side. As for the others, they entered the remains of the small world on the other side. The space between the 2 pieces of ice once again welcomed uninvited guests. The moment they entered the small world, they felt an oppressive chill. Long Yu couldn't help but shiver, and even Red Oriole, who was beside him, felt the same. The wreckage of this small world was simply too cold, and because it had suffered quite a bit of damage, it caused the ice attribute divine runes to be somewhat chaotic. There was even some water element mixed in, which made the cold feel even colder. So this is the small world of a demigod. Long Yu looked over and saw that what appeared in front of him was a void that was as cold as snow. Ice divine characters were everywhere, and there were even quite a few storms of ice divine characters. These storms weren't usually fierce, but they lowered the temperature of the entire small world to an extremely low level. Fortunately, this temperature only made the cultivators feel a little cold, and it wouldn't cause any harm to them. However, the next moment, Red Oriole pointed in a direction in the distance. It's better for us to avoid the ice storms over there. Even we will be hurt if we're involved. Long Yu looked over, and what he saw was a fierce, snow-white storm mixed with water element power. Everywhere it passed, even the void was frozen, and the temperature in the nearby area was lowered to absolute zero. Even Red Oriole didn't dare to touch such a violent storm, let alone Long Yu. I'm a little worried about those guys on the other side, but they're all smart. There shouldn't be any problems. Long Yu smiled and thought of the situation on the other side. Facing the remains of the demigod's small world in such a situation, it was rather convenient to move around. However, there were ice divine characters everywhere, and the visibility was rather low. The most important thing was to rely on the senses. Red Oriole nodded, indicating that she agreed with Long Yu. There weren't many of those fierce, snow-white storms, and they weren't moving very fast. As long as one wasn't stupid, there wouldn't be any problem to avoid them. Let's begin Light of Balance. Long Yu nodded at Red Oriole and activated the secret technique of balance control. A peak-level secret technique directly released a burst of Light of Balance, which was added to Red Oriole's body. Red Oriole took the opportunity to use balance control to enhance her spiritual sense. She was able to sense everything within a radius of over 100 million kilometers. With such powerful spiritual sense perception abilities, Long Yu and Red Oriole's searching speed was definitely top-notch. The small world of an ordinary lesser ruler would have a circumference of 10 billion kilometers, but the small world of a demigod expert would definitely have a circumference of over 1 trillion kilometers, and this was even if they were calculating on the small side. Therefore, if it weren't for Long Yu's Light of Balance and Red Oriole's own balance control, it would have been impossible for them to search through half of the small world of a demigod in just half a night. In this world of ice and snow, Red Oriole seemed to have a bright lamp that illuminated the range of 100 million kilometers. So many powerful storms. It seems that we'll have to spend more time and avoid some of the bigger storms if we want to move forward. The closest connate divine ability fruit is 80 million kilometers away from us. Should we go and take a look? Red Oriole quickly came to a conclusion and asked Long Yu, a demigod's connate divine ability. Are you confident? Long Yu asked uncertainly. Previously, when searching the small world of a third-stage dominator, Red Oriole could directly enter the connate divine ability fruit without any danger. But now, this was the small world of a demigod expert. Even if I'm not confident, I have to give it a try. That connate divine ability fruit just so happens to be undamaged. If there are no accidents, there will definitely be a lot of good things inside. Red Oriole's eyes lit up. Although it was very dangerous, she liked doing things that were full of challenges. Then let's go. I'll wait for you outside. Be careful. It was impossible for Long Yu to enter the other party's connate divine ability fruit. With his martial arts realm, he would only be courting death if he entered. Therefore, he could only wait for Red Oriole to act. Don't worry. If there really is danger, I also have a life-saving technique. Chapter 1287. Very soon, Red Oriole was 8,000 kilometers away. The void was still filled with the power of the ice divine characters. However, there weren't any storms that were too strong. Perhaps it was because they were near the connate remarkable fruit that the ice storm was much weaker than in other places. The two of them floated in the air and stared at the connate fruit of God in front of them. Their eyes were filled with shock because the connate fruit of God in front of them was actually a gigantic ice coffin. In the ice coffin lay a pitch-black, enormous body. It was extremely strange. It looked like a human, but had countless tentacles. It was frozen in the huge ice coffin. Red Oriole found it hard to believe. There's actually the corpse of some unknown creature in this connate fruit of mystique. I've never heard of such an alien species. Aren't connate mystiques born when a cultivator is in the mystique realm. Long Yu furrowed his brows. After a moment of thought, he said, I don't know if this corpse has existed since the birth of this innate technique, or if the demigod of the Ice God clan only placed this corpse in after it was born. I don't know. If we saw the demigod of the Ice God race fight, we might be able to speculate. But right now, we can't figure anything out. Red Oriole shook her head, indicating that there was nothing she could do. Then what do we do now? Long Yu raised his head and asked, let me see if there's an entrance to this ice coffin and if I can get in. As Red Oriole spoke, she activated balance control and covered the entire ice coffin with her spiritual senses. Clearly, she wanted to probe the entire ice coffin. But very soon, Red Oriole shook her head in disappointment. The entire ice coffin is completely sealed. It's impossible to find a way to enter. There's only one way to get in, and that's to break the ice coffin. Red Oriole's eyes flashed with hesitation. Long Yu pondered and said, will there be any consequences if we break the ice coffin? That pitch-black corpse is a creature we've never seen before. If there's something strange about it, we won't be able to escape unscathed. There's no need to break it. In any case, this small world fragment is ours now. The innate magic fruit won't be able to run away. Let's wait until we're safe before dealing with it. Red Oriole felt a little guilty. She was usually very bold, but for some reason, she felt a chill run down her spine when she saw that unknown corpse. This kind of situation could be said to have never happened before. This made Red Oriole even more fearful of the unknown corpse. Now that the ice coffin was sealed inside, nothing would happen to it. However, if the coffin was broken, the unknown corpse would be exposed to the outside world. It was very likely that some unexpected damage would be caused. Red Oriole's intuition told her that shattering the ice coffin would do her no good. Of course, Long Yu listened to Red Oriole. In fact, he also sensed an incomparably strange aura from the corpse. Although it was only a corpse, just a corpse alone was enough to make him feel so uneasy. Just what kind of existence had it been when it was alive? We can go back and look up information on the armies on the battlefield. Perhaps we'll find something useful. Long Yu shook his head and said, let's forget about it for now. Let's continue looking for the next one. Red Oriole nodded in agreement. Let's go. Before the two of them left, they glanced once more at the unknown corpse sealed in the ice coffin. Both of them felt a chill in their hearts. Without thinking too much, they quickly left this place. Very soon, the two of them were hundreds of millions of kilometers away from the ice coffin. At this point, Red Oriole could no longer sense its existence with her spiritual senses. Only now did the two of them finally relax. Along the way, the strange aura of the unknown corpse had been lingering around them, giving them a very bad feeling. This is too strange. Senior Landslide should know about this ice coffin and the corpse within it. After all, they've entered this small world fragment and killed many of the Ice God clan's ruling armies. However, he didn't tell us anything. Long Yu thought to himself, feeling a little strange. If it's something important or dangerous, they'll definitely take it away, right? Red Oriole nodded, thinking the same thing. Could it be that we're thinking too much? I don't know. If we have the chance, we'll ask Senior Landslide. We won't be able to figure anything out here. Long Yu said with a smile. That's true. We'll see when the time comes. Red Oriole shook her head, no longer thinking about the unknown corpse. However, for some reason, the corpse's appearance kept appearing in her mind, and she could not get it out of her head. Long Yu felt the same way. He felt that there was something off about the corpse, but there was nothing he could do about it. He could only give up on thinking about it for now. The two of them quickly approached the next innate magic fruit. Red Oriole had already sensed its existence, but the situation this time was still a little strange. Perhaps the innate magic fruit has already been destroyed. Let's go take a look. The entire small world was already in ruins, and it had even been split in half. It was no surprise that the innate magic fruit had been destroyed. The two of them flew toward their destination. Very soon, they saw an extremely vast spatial crack. Even the frigid ice divine characters could not be found near the spatial crack. No matter what it was, as long as it approached, it would be directly sucked away by the spatial crack. There was no suspense at all. Once sucked into the spatial crack, no one knew what they would encounter, not even demigod experts. It was said that the spatial crack was a fault in time and space. It was even more terrifying than the vortex of the Genesis 5 elements. The vortex of the Genesis 5 elements was composed of the power of the Genesis 5 elements, so there was still energy inside. However, the spatial crack was said to be absolutely empty. There was nothing inside. The reason why it was said to be a legend was because no one had ever been able to come out after entering. Not even demigod experts. Of course, there were naturally no demigod experts who had tried. It was just that this was a legend that had been passed down since ancient times. No one knew how long ago, perhaps a demigod expert had indeed tried, but was unable to return in the past. Long had also used these spatial cracks to trap and kill quite a few experts in the wreckage of the suffering victims in the Netherworld realm. At that time, he had only just arrived at the King's Path secret realm, but he was already being hunted by Emperor Realm experts. In the wreckage of the small world, he had used these spatial cracks to directly trap and kill countless powerful opponents, causing the two empires to suffer extremely heavy losses. But now, even though Long Yu had improved a lot, he still did not dare to touch those spatial cracks at all. First of all, it was a dead end, and second of all, there was no benefit at all. What a pity. A connate divine fruit actually fell into a spatial crack. Red Oriole said rather regretfully, "There's no other way. Let's keep looking." Long Yu looked at the boundless spatial crack. There was not even a single frigid ice divine character around it. It was completely empty, and he knew how dangerous that spatial crack was. The two of them quickly flew past this area and continued to fly into the depths of the wreckage of the small world. Very soon, the two of them were once again immersed in wave after wave of frigid ice storms. They could not see anything with their naked eyes and could only rely on their spiritual senses to sense. Gradually, even their spiritual senses were affected. The range that Red Oriole could sense became smaller and smaller. After 2 hours, it had shrunk to only half of its original range. The other connate divine fruit has arrived. It looks like this connate divine fruit can weaken the strength of spiritual senses or even completely block spiritual senses. We're very close now. I wonder if there will be any accidents. Should we go take a look? Red Oriole said in a low voice. I'll go with you. I have the 9 Hell Tablet now. If we encounter any danger, I can let us directly enter the 9 Hell Tablet. Then we'll be absolutely safe. Of course, unless we get sucked into a spatial crack. In that case, I really don't know what will happen. As Long Yu spoke, he followed Red Oriole. Red Oriole did not object to Long Yu's suggestion. The two of them advanced forward together. The further they went, the weaker the range of Red Oriole's spiritual senses became. Very soon, the two of them arrived at an area filled with dancing snowflakes. The dancing, icy snowflakes in this area did not have much destructive power, but they were able to block the two's spiritual senses to the greatest extent. Even Red Oriole's spiritual senses had been weakened to a mere 5 kilometers. This was already an extremely dangerous distance. After all, to some powerful beings, 10 kilometers was a distance that could be traversed in an instant. If there was any danger around them, the two of them would not be able to detect it at all. However, the two of them did not retreat. Instead, they continued forward until their spiritual senses were completely blocked. The dancing snowflakes all around them completely obscured their vision. Don't tell me we're already inside that connate divine fruit. Suddenly, Long Yu raised a question. After walking for so long, he had yet to touch anything substantial, so he could not help but wonder. Red Oriole heard this and immediately felt that it made sense. It's very possible, but this connate divine fruit is really strange. It can completely block our spiritual senses. If it were to use this kind of divine ability in battle, the effect would be a little too heaven-defying. Long Yu nodded in deep thought. Balance control could greatly enhance a cultivator's spiritual senses. Needless to say, it was very effective for Long Yu and Red Oriole. The effects were very obvious, and this ice god demigod's connate divine ability could actually block other people's spiritual senses. This was completely the opposite of balance control. If it were used on the battlefield, one could imagine how terrifying it would be. Chapter 1288. The two of them slowly advanced through the snowstorm. Since their spiritual senses and eyes were completely useless, they had no choice but to be extremely cautious, constantly on guard against any unusual situations. Since they were already so deep, they could only continue moving forward. If they retreated, they would face the same situation. They had already arrived at the center of the snowstorm area. As long as they kept moving forward, it would be fine. The two of them couldn't even see each other in the snowstorm. They could only hold each other's hands as they slowly advanced. As they slowly advanced, the power in their bodies constantly circulated, ready to break free at any time. Meanwhile, Long Yu had the 9 Hell tablet ready at all times. If anything happened, he could take Red Oriole and hide in the 9 Hell tablet. The whistling of the snowstorm constantly rang out around them, but the two of them were like blind people as they passed through it. Fortunately, even after a long time, no danger approached the two of them. It seemed that there was only wind and snow in this snowstorm realm, and there was nothing else. There seems to be something up ahead. Long Yu suddenly discovered something and roared. The whistling of the snowstorm was too loud, so he had to shout. Red Oriole might not be able to hear him. When Red Oriole heard this, she looked in the direction Long Yu was pointing. Indeed, there was a hazy, icy blue light about half a kilometer to the left. Although it was very hazy, it was still very clear that it was different from its surroundings due to the snowstorm. Let's go and take a look. Red Oriole also shouted, before holding hands with Long Yu as they slowly walked towards the hazy, icy blue light. At the center of the snowstorm, a hazy, icy blue light spread out. No one knew how long it had been since anyone had come here. Now that Long Yu and Red Oriole had arrived, they discovered that the icy blue light was actually coming from an ice crystal. Not only that, but even the snowstorm in the surroundings was constantly flying out of the ice crystal. Countless snowflakes danced in the air, forming this marvelous scene. It could actually block the spiritual senses of any cultivator that entered its range. It was truly shocking. Could this ice crystal be the core of the connate mystic fruit? Long Yu thought to himself. He wasn't too sure because he compared the 7 innate god fruits in his body and didn't find anything similar. Whether it was the 9 underworld's dragon breath, 9 underworld's hunter, or other magical powers, there was nothing like this ice crystal. This ice crystal should be a method to strengthen divine abilities. It's not something that was born in the innate divine ability fruit, but something that was found and placed inside to strengthen the divine ability. Red Oriole thought for a moment, and then loudly said to Long Yu, if someone cultivates and comprehends ice attribute divine text, the effects of this ice crystal will definitely be very good, and its value will also be very high. If it is contributed to the army on the battlefield, it will be worth at least several million contribution points. A few million army contribution points was definitely not a small number. Long Yu was a little surprised. This was equivalent to a heaven crystal level creation item. How much can this ice crystal increase the power of an ice attribute innate god ability? Long Yu shouted loudly. When they arrived near the ice crystal, the sound of the cold wind blowing snow became even noisier. Their voices had to be even louder than before in order for the other party to hear them. At least 2 times, maybe even 3 times. There are other similar existences in the world, but they are all very rare. If there is something similar to the shadow attribute, it will also be very effective in improving your divine ability. As Red Oriole spoke, she began to move. Blood-colored divine text spread out from her body, gradually condensing into a huge blood-colored hand. After that, the blood-red hand grabbed at the ice crystal, and it immediately stopped the cold energy that was being emitted from it. The ice crystal did not erupt with any destructive power. It obediently allowed Red Oriole to take it away. When the ice crystal was absorbed into Red Oriole's pocket world, the temperature seemed to rise significantly. Even the noise of the cold wind blowing through the snow instantly weakened. The blowing of the snow around them grew slower and slower, and Long Yu and Red Oriole's spiritual senses also began to gradually recover. Although it's not completely recovered, I can at least sense existences hundreds of kilometers away. It seems that this is the original effect of this innate god ability. It can weaken the perception of spiritual senses by 10 times, but it can't completely block it. Red Oriole breathed a sigh of relief. She probed the surroundings with her spiritual senses and found that everything was normal. There was no danger nearby, and the wind and snow were getting weaker and weaker. Without the support of the ice crystal, the hindrance of the innate god ability on spiritual senses had been weakened by at least 10 times. Let's sell the ice crystal later and split the money. Haha. Red Oriole was very happy. This unexpected gain was very useful to her. Even if she traded it for other cultivation resources, it would at least be enough for her to advance by 1 level. As expected of the fragment of a demigod expert's pocket world, there's actually such a good thing. Long Yu also felt a little emotional. However, the two of them did not linger for too long. They quickly left the area and headed deeper into the fragment. However, the exploration of the wreckage of the small world was almost over. Every pocket world had 7 innate god ability fruits, and a fragment of a demigod expert's pocket world was divided into 2 halves. The half that Long Yu and Red Oriole entered had either 3 or 4 innate god ability fruits, and they had no idea if there were more ahead. As they continued forward, the two of them became even more careful. The spatial rifts around them grew more and more numerous and densely packed. Sometimes, they completely blocked their way in front of them. Along the way, the two of them found some good items, such as the Ice God Outsider's battle weapons. Some were ancient, some were arcane, and some were even unbounded. Although these battle weapons could not be used by humans or demons, it was not a bad choice to take them back and reforge them. They could smelt many materials for battle weapons. After all, this was the pocket world of a demigod expert. All kinds of battle weapons and creations were placed together in the pocket world. The two of them searched very carefully. Once their spiritual senses detected anything suspicious, they would immediately go forward to check. It was very likely that they would find a spatial battle weapon. Within the spatial weapon, there were some cultivation resources, spatial weapons, and all sorts of medicinal pills. Unfortunately, these medicinal pills were useless to Long Yu and Red Oriole. Most of the medicinal pills found here were only for the Ice God clan. Humans and demon clans were unable to absorb the medicinal potency within them. After all, the physical structures of different races were different. The last innate god ability fruit is here. What a pity. Very soon, Long Yu and Red Oriole arrived at the location of the last innate god ability fruit. Then, the two of them saw a spectacular scene. In front of them was an enormous spatial fissure. It almost crossed the entire pocket world and appeared in front of them. Above the spatial fissure, there was an enormous and magnificent ice mountain. This ice mountain was the last innate god ability Red Oriole had sensed. It was probably many times larger than the 9 Hell Prison Steel, or even the entire Shun Wu world. However, the ice mountain was being devoured by the spatial fissure. Although the speed was very slow, it was obvious that the entire ice mountain would be devoured by the spatial fissure soon. At this rate, it will take a few more days for the ice mountain to be completely devoured. What should we do now? Should we enter the ice mountain and search? Long Yu squinted and asked Red Oriole. Without a doubt, the ice mountain was being devoured by the spatial fissure. If they want to search it now, it would be very dangerous. However, this was the last innate god ability fruit. If the demigod expert had stored something in it, it must be something very valuable. Although it's very dangerous, I don't think I'll be satisfied if I don't try. Red Oriole nodded. You stay here. I'll go alone. Facing the spatial fissure, if there's any danger, You won't be able to save me even if you follow me. Let's go together. I'm worried about you. Long Yu said this with a guilty conscience. With his current cultivation, he was worried about Red Oriole? That was too funny. After all, Red Oriole's martial arts realm was much higher than his. Your cultivation is too low. Just the power of the ice mountain is enough to freeze you to death. You should just stay here. Don't worry, I won't get into trouble so easily. Red Oriole rubbed Long Yu's head and giggled, but she was determined not to let Long Yu follow her. To be honest, she would be faster if she went alone. If Long Yu followed her, she would have to take care of Long Yu, which might delay them for a bit. Long Yu did not insist. Actually, he knew that apart from the 9 Hell Tablet, he wouldn't be of much help if he stayed by Red Oriole's side. I have to improve my strength quickly. As Long Yu thought to himself, he watched as Red Oriole quickly flew towards the ice mountain. Of course, before Red Oriole left, Long Yu blessed her with the light of equilibrium, which increased her spiritual perception by 10 times. This allowed her to sense some possible dangers in advance. The ice mountain was tens of thousands of kilometers away from the spatial fissure. If Red Oriole entered the ice mountain from that side, she probably wouldn't be attracted by the spatial fissure. After all, it was still very far away. Before long, Red Oriole disappeared from Long Yu's sight. He could only rely on the perception of balance control to know her current situation. Chapter 1289. Long Yu was a little puzzled. There should have been a lot of cultivation resources left in the wreckage of the small world, but because of the ravaging space cracks and the sweeping ice storms, many of the cultivation resources had been destroyed. Sometimes the space soldiers they found were damaged, and most of the things stored in them had been damaged. This was obviously the work of the ice storms. Red Oriole went to explore the iceberg, and Long Yu could only wait in silence in the distance. He thought of the unknown corpse with pitch-black tentacles all over it, the source of the Holy Spirit that he wanted to exchange for, and the ice crystal that he had obtained not long ago. All in all, they had gained a lot from the exploration of the small world this time, but it was still a little short of Long Yu's estimation. Even if the ice crystal was very valuable, together with the other soldiers and cultivation resources, the total would only be about 6 or 7 million army merit points. And this wreckage of the small world belonged to an alien race expert at the demigod level. How much wealth would a demigod have? For a demigod, even a divine quality absolute beginning item was not a good thing. But now they had only found 3 damaged divine quality absolute beginning items in the wreckage of the small world. Obviously, most of the treasures had been destroyed. After all, the battle between demigods was too fierce, and the small world of the defeated must have been brutally destroyed. It was even possible that the demigod of the Ice God clan had directly detonated one of the connate fruits of mystique, which was why the place where the other connate fruit of mystique had been completely swallowed by the space crack. Because of this, the iceberg-like connate fruit of mystique was their last hope. Maybe they could get some valuable things from it. Long Yu waited outside, and Red Oriole quickly entered the iceberg as fast as she could. She used the blood-colored divine symbols to break open a passage in the iceberg. About 2 hours later, Long Yu watched the iceberg from afar as it was slowly absorbed by the space crack. He could not help but feel a little anxious, but he knew that it was useless. However, at this time, he discovered that the speed at which the iceberg was being absorbed by the space crack was getting faster and faster. In just a few breaths, it was suddenly 10 times faster than before. This situation caused Long Yu to be greatly alarmed. According to the original speed, it would take at least a few days for the entire iceberg to be sucked into the spatial crack. However, at the current speed, it might not last long. Would Red Oriole be in danger? Most importantly, the speed at which the ice mountain was being absorbed was still growing faster and faster. This caused Long Yu to be unable to remain calm. If this continued, Red Oriole might not be able to leave in time. Red Oriole happily said as she pulled Long Yu. The ice crystal from before is actually called ice essence. This one is called space essence. It can be used to increase the power of spatial attribute innate spells. Space essence. Long Yu repeated the name, and his eyes lit up. Maybe this thing could be used on his path of the Nine Nether Divine art. He hadn't expected that Red Oriole would obtain such a good thing from her adventure. This was a little out of Long Yu's expectations. However, he still didn't understand the specific effects of the space essence, so he asked about it. After Red Oriole's explanation, Long Yu was shocked once again. If the ice essence from before could increase the power of a cultivator's ice attribute innate spells by 3 times, then this space essence was much larger than the ice essence from before. It could definitely increase the power or effect of a cultivator's space attribute innate spells by 8 times or more. The reason why the speed at which the ice mountain was being sucked into the spatial rift was so slow was because the space essence within the ice mountain was resisting the suction force of the spatial rift. When Red Oriole removed the space essence, the speed at which the ice mountain was being sucked in instantly increased by 100 times. It was clear just how terrifying the effects of this space essence were. I don't have any space attribute innate spells anymore. My teleportation methods are all derived from martial techniques. However, you seem to have an innate spell that has a little to do with space. Although it's not completely of the space attribute, it should still be able to be greatly enhanced when paired with this space essence. As Red Oriole spoke to Long Yu, she handed a crystal that emanated the aura of space divine characters to Long Yu. This crystal was about the size of a human head. Compared to the fist-sized ice essence from before, it was indeed much more powerful. When Long Yu heard this, he immediately thought of his own innate spell, the Path of 9 Underworlds. The Path of 9 Underworld was not a pure spatial god art, but it had the effect of breaking through spatial barriers. If the spatial essence was placed in the Path of 9 Underworlds god art fruit, would it increase its ability to break through spatial barriers by 8 times? The more Long Yu thought about it, the more likely it seemed. He immediately accepted the crystal. Soon, the two of them were far away from the area affected by the spatial rift. Looking into the distance, they saw that the huge ice mountain had already been swallowed by the spatial rift, leaving nothing behind. If Red Oriole had come out just a little later, she would have been swallowed up by now. It had to be known that the closer one was to the spatial rift, the stronger the suction. If Red Oriole had been any closer to the spatial rift, she would not have been able to escape the suction even if she used all her strength. Fortunately, she was still very fast. After obtaining the space essence, she immediately escaped from the ice mountain as fast as she could, not even taking a breath's time. Now is not the time for Long Yu to experiment with the space essence. After all, there were still many dangers in the wreckage of this small world. For example, there were spatial rifts everywhere, and there were also ice storms everywhere. Thus, the two of them first continued to search. Soon, they had searched the remaining areas of the wreckage of the small world. Unfortunately, they did not find anything else. Perhaps because this place was very close to the edge of the small world, the damage it suffered was much more severe than the other areas. The spatial rifts were also much more frequent than the other areas, and the spatial rifts that appeared here were much larger. Because of this, all the space soldiers and cultivation resources that had drifted into this area were either destroyed by the snowstorm or absorbed by the spatial cracks, disappearing without a trace. The two of them searched through the wreckage of this half of the small world. Once they found nothing useful, they prepared to leave. We didn't run into the Ice God clan that had a demigod realm cultivator here. Red Oriole smiled and said, existences like the Shenwu world might be in the other half of the small world. Hopefully, there aren't any existences that are too powerful for Gu Ishian's group to deal with. Long Yu also nodded. The two of them left hand in hand. Before they left, they recalled the unknown corpse that they encountered not long after entering this place, giving them an ominous feeling. However, they didn't think too much about it. After all, the corpse was temporarily frozen inside the ice coffin and wouldn't be able to come out anytime soon. Not to mention, no matter how terrifying it was still just a corpse. Long Yu quickly turned his attention to the space essence. Chapter 1290. Long Yu and Red Oriole were the first to leave the fragment of the small world. The two of them did not pay much attention to the unknown corpse in the ice coffin. Long Yu, on the other hand, was completely focused on the spatial essence. He wanted to know how much this treasure could improve his Path of Nine Nether. The Path of Nine Nether was Long Yu's seventh technique. When it was performed, it could create a passage that could penetrate any spatial barrier. Then, he could directly ignore the spatial barrier. This was a very good, life-saving technique for him at critical moments. Sometimes his opponents thought that they had trapped him, but in fact, he could escape from the spatial barrier at any time. He hadn't used this technique very often before, because the opponents who wanted to trap him were always much stronger than him. Even the Path of Nine Nether couldn't work. Previously, in the Galactic Ruins, Long Yu had used this technique to escape from the encirclement of the Black-Scale demons. It was also at that time that the Nine Nether prison steel exploded for the first time and killed countless members of the Black-Scale demons. There was no need to say more about the effect of this technique. According to Long Yu's estimation, the spatial barrier that the Path of Nine Nether could pass through was probably the spatial barrier created by ordinary high-level sovereigns. But for Long Yu, this was far from enough. Not only was he going to explore the relics of the primeval alien species, but he would also join the Demigods College in the future and experience the most dangerous trials. If he could make the technique stronger, his life would be much safer at the critical moment. However, only a small part of the technique in the Path of Nine Nether was of the spatial attribute. The rest was of the shadow attribute. In the connate fruit of Nine Nether, the power of the spatial attribute only took up 1/3. As for the spatial essence, it seemed a bit wasteful to use it in such a place. But Long Yu didn't bother to think so much. After all, among the connate fruits of Nine Nether, only the Path of Nine Nether contained the power of the spatial divine characters. Let's give it a try. Long Yu and Red Oriole looked at each other and smiled. After all, it was something obtained from the remains of the small world. It would be a waste if they didn't use it. It was better to strengthen themselves than to sell it. Besides, nobody could afford such a precious item except for demigods. It was impossible to sell it in a short time. Long Yu held the space essence in his hand. It was a crystal with the mysterious space divine power. The space divine power inside seemed to be stronger and purer than the water absolute beginning power. Of course, Long Yu knew that this was definitely a power that surpassed the 5 elements of the absolute beginning. Or rather, it was an even stronger power derived from the absolute beginning power. To put it simply, it should be some kind of spatial elemental revelation divine rune. Endless revelation grade spatial divine characters were condensed into this crystal. Embedding it into a connate mystic art could strengthen the spatial power of the mystic art. Under Red Oriole's watchful eyes, Long Yu held the spatial essence crystal and entered the Nine Hell Tablet. Right now, Long Yu's connate mystic fruit was in the small world, and the entrance to the small world was in the Nine Hell Tablet. It was next to the space inside the Nine Hell Tablet. Now that Long Yu could control the size of the Nine Hell Tablet, he kept it the size of a palm. Then, with Red Oriole looking after it, he didn't need to worry about anything happening to it. After entering his small world, Long Yu didn't waste any time, because there wasn't much time left before the trip to the primordial alien ruins. He still had to embed the space essence into the connate mystic fruit and see how strong this move was. Very soon, he arrived near the connate mystic fruit in the Nine Hell Path. This connate mystic fruit presented a pitch-black path. In the dark void, it was impossible to see it with the naked eye, but of course, Long Yu could sense where it was. The space essence should be directly embedded in it, Long Yu thought to himself. Then, he held the space essence in his hand and moved the crystal-like existence towards the center of the Nine Hell Path. Very soon, the space essence gradually disappeared into the dark path under Long Yu's control. Then, Long Yu could clearly feel that his connate mystic fruit had actually started to absorb the power of the revelation-level space divine text in the space essence. The power of the space essence was absolutely unimaginable, and his connate mystic fruit had only absorbed a very small part of it. Then, the power of the revelation-level space divine text spread throughout the dark path. He could feel that the connate mystic fruit had strengthened the nine-hell path by a lot. Of course, Long Yu didn't know what kind of effect it would have, so he could only go out and give it a try. It's about time to leave. When Long Yu felt the changes in the nine-hell path gradually stabilize, he nodded in satisfaction and immediately left his small world. His figure flew out of the nine-hell tablet outside and reappeared in front of Red Oriole. "It's done?" Red Oriole asked. "Yes." Long Yu nodded and chuckled. "Why don't we try it out and see how it works? You can create a space barrier and see if I can pass through it." Red Oriole was an expert at the Sovereign Realm. If it had been before she had obtained the space essence, the nine-hell path definitely wouldn't have been able to pass through the space barrier she had created. But now, that might not be the case. Red Oriole didn't refuse. She brought Long Yu and flew directly into the sky above Sky Cliff City. After all, they had to test the effects of the connate mystic fruit, so they couldn't do it inside Sky Cliff City. Otherwise, it would be bad if they caused damage. The two of them flew high into the sky and were almost 10,000 kilometers away from the fallen blood planet before they stopped. As a princess of the blood demon race, it was naturally not a problem for Red Oriole to create a space barrier. However, her compatibility with spatial divine characters wasn't very high, and she hadn't comprehended any particularly powerful spatial divine characters. The space barrier she had created was most likely not very powerful. She knew this herself. "Little brother Long, you have to be mentally prepared. This space barrier of mine is only half-baked. You will most likely be able to pass through it. If you really want to test out the effects of your nine-hell path, I'm afraid that I alone won't be enough. Yes, let's try it out first. It would be embarrassing if I couldn't even pass through your space barrier." Long Yu chuckled and gestured for Red Oriole to move faster. Red Oriole didn't waste any time. After finding a good spot, blood-red spatial divine characters appeared all over her body. Even the spatial divine characters she had comprehended were blood-red in color. Long Yu hadn't paid much attention to them before. Very quickly, those blood-red spatial divine runes formed a blood-red spatial cage. It was square-shaped, and it completely enveloped Long Yu within it. It was like a blood-red prison that completely imprisoned Long Yu. Long Yu first opened his mouth and unleashed a dragon breath of the nine hells. However, it was obvious that although his dragon breath of the nine hells was extremely destructive, it was unable to pass through this blood-red prison. This was the space barrier that Red Oriole had used. This was completely within Long Yu's expectations and didn't surprise him at all. After all, a space barrier represented the obstruction of space. Unless one had the power of space, even a powerful destructive divine ability like the dragon breath of the nine hells would not be able to pass through this space barrier. All right, let's give it a try. Outside, when Red Oriole saw Long Yu's actions, she covered her mouth and took a few steps back, waiting for Long Yu to use the path of the nine hells. Long Yu nodded his head in the crimson cage, then focused on activating the innate divine fruit of the path of nine underworlds. This time, he felt completely different from before. He could clearly feel that the power of the spatial attribute had increased by at least 10 times. The surging and majestic power of the spatial divine characters caused the path of the nine hells' space barrier to increase exponentially. In the next moment, a dark spatial path stretched out from Long Yu's hand, and it stretched out in one go and completely penetrated the blood-red cage. Not only did this dark path penetrate one side of the blood-red prison, but also contain a power that could disintegrate the spatial divine characters, causing the entire blood-red prison to begin to collapse. What's going on? Even Red Oriole was surprised. This was something she had never seen or even heard of before. Long Yu's path of the Nine Hells could actually disintegrate the spatial divine characters. This effect of disintegrating the spatial divine characters left Red Oriole in disbelief. Long Yu, hurry up and give try. See if your path of the Nine Hells can even disintegrate the primordial power of water. If you could do it, then it'll be heaven-defying. Red Oriole hurriedly said excitedly. An extremely powerful ability with such an effect would be very useful in battle, especially in the process of exploring ancient foreign ruins. It might even produce some miraculous effects. Long Yu was also a little excited. He hadn't expected the path of the Nine Hells to undergo such a transformation after being imbued with spatial essence. In just 3 breaths of time, the blood-red prison that had enveloped him had completely disintegrated, no longer existing. This meant that Red Oriole's spatial divine characters couldn't trap Long Yu at all. It had to be known that although Red Oriole didn't primarily cultivate spatial divine characters, she was still a powerful sovereign. If it were any other lesser sovereign, it would be impossible for them to escape her blood-red prison. Little Void, come out and let me try. Long Yu laughed and took out the nether void dragon blade from his bosom. Little Void was resting and looked a little unwilling to be disturbed. However, she was the only one who could release the primordial power of water right now. If Long Yu wanted to test it out, he would have to find her. In any case, she had nothing to lose, and she naturally listened to Long Yu. She couldn't possibly refuse Long Yu's request. Chapter 1291. The spatial barrier formed by the Void Nether Dragon Blade was composed of water-type primordial energy and could be said to be one of the strongest spatial barriers in the world. After all, water-type primordial energy was the source of all spatial divine characters, and most of the spatial divine characters in the world were unsuccessfully modified water-type primordial energy. Thus, as long as a spatial barrier formed by water-type primordial energy was strong enough, it would definitely be very difficult to destroy. When the Void Nether Dragon Blade formed a water-type primordial energy barrier, Long Yu raised his hand and released a path of 9 underworlds at the barrier. The dark path quickly spread out and soon penetrated the primordial energy barrier. This was something that everyone had expected. After all, the spatial barrier formed by the Void Nether Dragon Blade was not very strong and could not even compare to Red Oriole's blood-red cage. But what happened next was the key. After penetrating the water-type primordial energy barrier, the power of the path of 9 underworlds immediately began to disintegrate it, just like what had happened to the blood-red cage. Although the speed at which it disintegrated the water-type primordial energy barrier was slightly slower, it proved that the path of 9 underworlds could indeed disintegrate water-type primordial energy. This was definitely an extremely shocking discovery. Being able to penetrate and disintegrate spatial barriers were 2 completely different concepts. If it was just penetrating, Long Yu and Red Oriole would not be so excited. At most, the effect of the path of 9 underworlds would be stronger. But being able to disintegrate, it was a completely different concept. This meant that no matter how strong a spatial barrier was, the path of 9 underworlds could disintegrate it. It was just a matter of time. The more powerful the expert, the more power they used to create a spatial barrier, and the longer it would take for it to disintegrate. Right now, although the water-type primordial energy barrier formed by the Void Nether Dragon Blade was not as strong as Red Oriole's blood-red cage, its power was much higher, so the speed at which it disintegrated was much slower. But it could still be disintegrated. This was Long Yu and Red Oriole's greatest discovery. Without a doubt, the innate 9 Netherworld path, which had been infused with spatial essence, was an extremely powerful divine ability. As long as Long Yu was given enough time, there was no spatial barrier that he could not break. At most, he would just need to spend some time to destroy it. It was safe to say that it was definitely the most useful thing that had been found in the debris of the demigod alien world, and it happened to be very suitable for their trip to the primeval alien relics. It was easy to imagine that in the primordial alien ruins, they would definitely encounter some rather difficult situations, such as being unable to advance being trapped in a trap, and so on. But now, if they were to encounter a spatial divine character trap, there was no need for them to be afraid. This was because the Path of the Nine Underworld was able to destroy any spatial attribute divine characters, and this even included water attribute, Genesis, power. Of course, long you didn't know if the Path of the Nine Underworld would be able to disintegrate the Space Divine Rune. He didn't have any Space Divine Rune to test it out right now. With this divine ability of yours, our trip to the alien ruins will be much safer. At least, we won't be trapped or stopped by the spatial divine character traps. Red Oriole's beautiful eyes shone with a bright light. She was very envious of Long Yu's innate divine ability. Without a doubt, this was a divine ability. Fortunately, it was Long Yu who possessed it and not an enemy. Otherwise, it would be too terrifying. Well, now that the experiment is over, it's about time to get ready to go. Long Yu nodded and took a breath in relief. The effect of the Path of the Nine Underworld after infusing the spatial essence did not disappoint him. On planet Shui, in Sky Cliff City, the sky gradually brightened. Long Yu and Red Oriole returned to the city and waited for the meeting at the appointed place. As for the debris of the demigod expert's small world, half of it was carried by Long Yu, and the other half was left in Sky Cliff City for Man Xian, Chi Hua, and Fingyu Xian to explore together. The speed at which they explored the debris was far slower than Long Yu and Red Oriole. They had plenty of work to do. Long Yu and Red Oriole were waiting at the gate of Sky Cliff City. Very quickly, Concubine Yu and Shui Luo arrived together. Concubine Yu was wearing a white veil, exuding a celestial aura. Her appearance was still the same as before. One would not dare to profane her appearance. However, her eyes were filled with a cold, killing intent. Two completely different temperaments and styles were gathered on Consort Yu. Most importantly, they did not clash with each other. It was truly unimaginable. Shui Luo was wearing a blood-red armor and had a hearty smile on his face. He laughed heartily as he approached the two. "Sister, brother-in-law, are you ready? We're about to set off and go to the entrance of the ancient alien ruins through the space-time mark." Shui Luo walked over and smiled as he patted Long Yu's shoulder. Brother-in-law, Long Yu did not comment on this form of address. There was no need to let the other party know about the effects of the Path of Nine, Nether, just now. He smiled and said, "Yes, I'm ready. Come to my small world first. It won't be too late for you to come out if there's no danger in the ruins." Consort Yu said to the two with a light smile. This was to prevent the two from being killed as soon as they entered the ruins, because their cultivation was too low. Of course, Long Yu and Red Oriole would not refuse. But before that, they naturally had to meet with the others. Other than Consort Yu and Shui Luo, there were also some commanders from the battlefield who would be participating in this operation. This was something that Shui Luo had mentioned before. The ancient alien ruins were very dangerous. If there were not many people, they would not dare to casually enter. It wasn't that they would encounter any strong opponents. The main thing was that there were countless traps and mechanisms. The ancient alien ruins were left behind by the ancient alien races. Some of the races might have died out long ago, but they would leave behind many valuable items. Every foreign race relic was a huge fortune. However, it also contained countless risks and obstacles, and it was not easy to obtain the wealth inside. As the appointed time was almost up, the others would not make them wait for too long. Soon, two experts, one male and one female, flew over from the horizon. They were both wearing icy blue armor. Like Shui Luo, they were both fifth phase sovereigns. They were also emperor commanders. An Empyrean commander like Shui Luo would usually lead 10,000 Empyrean emperors from each clan, forming an Empyrean army. If the number of experts in the Empyrean army increased, then Shui Luo's status would rise as well. For example, if more than half of the Emperor Corps entered the Sovereign Secret Realm, the Corps would become a Quasi-Sovereign's Corps. They would receive special treatment from the Battlefield Corps. They would be given missions with rich rewards, allowing them to become a true Sovereign's Corps. The difference between the Emperor Corps and the Sovereign's Corps was huge. The Sovereign's Corps was the main force in the battlefield against the foreign races. They were also the main force of the battlefield corps. As for the Emperor Corps, most of them were engaged in small battles or unimportant missions. Although the danger was much lower, it was still very difficult to obtain more cultivation resources. Most of the cultivation resources of the Emperor Corps came from completing missions on the battlefield. If they only relied on group missions, who knew how long it would take for them to increase their martial realm? Situ Tianhe, Situ Qingyi, these two emperor commanders are from the Ice Bear demonic race. Shueluo introduced them to Long Yu and Red Oriole. The two experts, one male and one female, wearing icy blue armor, quickly flew over from the horizon and landed beside them. The two Ice Bear demonic race experts were very familiar with Shueluo. However, they did not know Consort Yu, Long Yu, or Red Oriole. I heard that you're the holy maiden of the Jiuyo tribe who left the human race. Rumor has it that you graduated from the Demigod Academy. Now that I look at it, you do indeed have a dangerous aura, haha. The burly man, Situ Tianhe, glanced at Consort Yu and laughed heartily. He was obviously looking forward to seeing Consort Yu. He must have heard that Consort Yu was coming with him this time, so he paid attention to her as soon as he arrived. The similarly burly Ice Bear demonic race woman, Situ Qingyi, stood beside Situ Tianhe. She also glanced at Consort Yu, her eyes flashing with a kind of reverence. If Consort Yu wasn't very strong, then this woman's eyes might have been a little provocative, but it was obvious that Consort Yu was much stronger than them. Under such circumstances, there was no need to provoke her at all. They would just be asking to be humiliated. However, when the two with the surname Situ turned their attention to Red Oriole and Long Yu, they weren't so friendly anymore. Shueluo, although this is your younger sister and the princess of your race, she has just stepped into the great sovereign realm. Is it really appropriate for her to follow us on this trip? Situ Tianhe said with a slight frown. It was indeed a little difficult for a first-rank great sovereign to explore the ancient foreign race's ruins. If they encountered any danger, they wouldn't even be able to run away in time. Right now, Situ Tianhe from the Ice Bear demonic race spoke rather politely out of respect for Shueluo and Consort Yu. However, his words revealed his dissatisfaction with Red Oriole and Long Yu following them on this trip. That's right, especially this person. He has just stepped into the lesser sovereign realm. Shueluo, Consort Yu, are you sure you wanted to follow us to his death? Situ Qingyi looked at Long Yu and frowned openly. It was obvious that she was very dissatisfied with Long Yu's current cultivation realm. Don't worry, the two of them have made great contributions on the battlefield of the foreign races. They have also helped to delay 3 demigod foreign races, which is why the Ice God clan won the battle. I think we don't need to worry about their safety. Shueluo smiled and began to speak to Red Oriole and Long Yu. Chapter 1292. Putting everything else aside, if this caused the whole team to be disunited, it would be very troublesome if something happened in the ancient foreign tribe ruins. Shueluo had a lot of trust in Red Oriole and Long Yu's abilities. Even if they couldn't help, they definitely wouldn't cause any trouble for them. It would be no problem for them to follow them. Therefore, Shueluo was a little dissatisfied with these two Ice Bear beasts. After Shueluo said this, Situ Tianhe still didn't trust them. His attitude toward Red Oriole and Long Yu didn't change. Of course, it was normal for them to think this way. After all, the ancient foreign tribe ruins weren't an ordinary place. It was very possible that some ignorant fellows might cause a catastrophic blow to the whole team if they ran around. Until Consort Yu said, "Everyone, don't worry. If there are no accidents, they will always be in my small world." Her words carried much more weight than Shueluo's. Moreover, since she had already said so, it wouldn't be right for them to have any objections. Situ Tianhe and Situ Qingyi of the Ice Bear Beasts were both powerhouses of the army on the battlefield. They had the same status as Shueluo. Therefore, they only respected Consort Yu and didn't need to be afraid. It should be noted that even a super powerhouse like Consort Yu was only a mercenary of the army on the battlefield. She couldn't do anything to them. Otherwise, the commanders of the army on the battlefield would definitely not let it go. Of course, if there wasn't any deep hatred between the powerhouses of the tribe, there wouldn't be any conflicts. Everyone would try to avoid it as much as possible. Long Yu and Red Oriole didn't say much. They just explained to Consort Yu that the space essence that Long Yu had just obtained could allow his path of 9 underworlds to corrode any space divine characters and even water elemental power. This news made Consort Yu's eyes light up. It should be noted that this method could save a life at a critical moment. Yufei didn't casually spread this news. Although this news would greatly increase Long Yu's status in the team, the effect wasn't good. Maybe some people would suspect something. Yufei didn't dare to spread this news. It wouldn't be too late for him to show it when he really needed Long Yu's ability in the primordial alien ruins. Only then would he be able to shock everyone and completely change their impression of Long Yu. After waiting for about an hour, other than Shuel Luo, Consort Yu, Situ, Tianhe, and Situ Qingyi, there were 6 other experts from the demon race and 1 expert from the human race. All of them were at least at the 5th level Dominator realm. That human expert caught Long Yu's attention because he was a white-haired youth. He was dressed in tattered clothes, and he looked like a beggar. Although he was a 6-phase ruler, he strangely didn't have any presence. It wasn't just Long Yu and Red Oriole. If the others didn't pay close attention, they would subconsciously ignore this white-haired youth. They didn't know what was going on. Long Yu and Red Oriole didn't notice this special characteristic of not having a presence at first. It was only after Consort Yu reminded them that they noticed the white-haired youth. Too strange. Long Yu furrowed his brows. He didn't know the identity of this white-haired youth, but since he was a human, he should be a mercenary for the demon race's battlefield army. Just like Consort Yu, he didn't belong to the battlefield army. In any case, the other party was a helper hire by Shuel Luo. Long Yu's current level was too low, so he didn't need to know too much. Apart from Long Yu and Red Oriole, who had to hide in Consort Yu's little world, the other 11 people were going to participate in the Ancient Outsider Ruins operation. The entrance to the Ancient Outsider Ruins was discovered by a member of Shuel Luo's army. Therefore, Shuel Luo was considered the leader of this operation. No one objected to this. After all, everyone had their own unspoken rules when it came to such matters. Next, under Shuel Luo's leadership, a total of 11 experts from the demon race's battlefield army set off for the Ancient Outsider Ruins that had been discovered a month ago. More than a month ago, the entrance to the Ancient Outsider Ruins had been discovered. Shuel Luo had been looking for people to observe it. During this period of time, there hadn't been any changes near the entrance of the Ancient Outsider Ruins. Everything was deathly silent. This was also to determine if the Ancient Outsider Ruins were explosion type. Some Ancient Outsider Ruins that suddenly appeared in the demon race's territory could be an explosion-type trap thrown by the outsiders. It was very likely that the Ancient Outsider Ruins would explode and destroy everything nearby. However, since nothing had happened in more than a month, there shouldn't be any problems. This Ancient Outsider Ruins must have been left from the ancient times. If it hadn't been for the fact that the power in the ruins had been exhausted and the aura concealing methods could no longer be maintained, it would have been impossible for Shuel Luo's subordinates to discover it. Even Shuel Luo and the demigod experts found it difficult to discover some of the Ancient Outsider Ruins that were exquisitely hidden. There were some special detection arrays near the entire border of the demon race's territory, which could prevent the Ancient Outsider Ruins from secretly transporting bomb-like things into the demon race's territory. As for the Ancient Outsider Ruins that were originally hidden in the territory, the demigod experts and the battlefield army didn't bother to pay attention to them. After all, they wouldn't cause too much harm. Instead, they could bring a lot of benefits to the explorers and also improve the explorers' battle experience when facing the Ancient Outsider Ruins. The 11 people, together with Long Yu and Red Oriole, soon went through the space-time mark and went to a heavily guarded area near the Shuel Luo planet. The entrance to the ancient outsider ruins was right in the center of this area. Everyone continue to stand guard. If no one comes out in a month, report this matter to the battlefield army. Also, be prepared to destroy the entrance of the ancient outsider ruins at any time. Shueluo ordered his subordinates in the battlefield army. His deputy wasn't weak either. He was a fourth-phase great sovereign. Of course, he wouldn't follow Shueluo in this operation. Instead, he received Shueluo's order to guard the entrance of the ancient outsider ruins. Many destruction arrays had been set up near the entrance. If anything unexpected happened, as long as these arrays were detonated, the entire entrance of the ancient outsider ruins would be blasted into the space turbulence. The danger of the ancient outsider ruins was too great. Shueluo had to make all kinds of preparations. Yes, sir. Shueluo's deputy respectfully accepted the order. Then, he escorted Shueluo and the 11 experts to the entrance of the ancient outsider ruins under heavy protection. It was a pale yellow circle of light. The entire circle was about the size of a human and was oval in shape. Obviously, only one person could enter at a time. Follow the plan. Xiaobai going first. Everyone else, follow. Shueluo gave the order. Then, the white-haired youth lazily walked to the front of the group. Up until now, he still didn't have much of a presence. With a step, he stepped into the pale yellow circle of light and disappeared from everyone's sight. If Long Yu knew that this white-haired youth was called Xiaobai, he would probably be shocked. Such a title could easily be mistaken as a pet. Following closely behind Xiaobai was Consort Yu. After all, Consort Yu was the strongest. Being the second to enter would not be a problem. As for the sixth-phase dominator, Xiaobai, due to his special ability, his survivability in any dangerous environment was definitely number one. Thus, letting him enter first wasn't a problem. After Concubine Yu, Shueluo followed closely behind. The rest of them followed suit and stepped into the pale yellow light circle in order. After the 11 people entered, the oval circle of light remained floating in the pitch-black void. There were no changes, as if no one had ever been there. As for the Shueluo army subordinates, they were dutifully guarding the entrance of the ancient outsider ruins. The exploration of the ancient outsider ruins had finally begun. Long Yu and Red Oriole, who were in Consort Yu's pocket world, could see what the outside world looked like through the image that Consort Yu provided them, accompanied by a burst of space-time, force, and distortion. After a stretch of darkness, Concubine Yu suddenly appeared in a void filled with flying yellow sand. This void was filled with yellow sand as far as the eye could see. Moreover, the yellow sand constantly condensed into a storm that swept through the void. The entire scene was like the end of the world. Its metal type, primordial force. Be careful. When Consort Yu saw the yellow sand, she immediately became incomparably vigilant and warned Red Oriole and Long Yu. The storm formed by the yellow sand was actually made up of metal type primordial force. It was easy to imagine that if they were swept into it, even Consort Yu would be in a lot of trouble. Although they wouldn't die inside, if they were caught in this storm inside the ancient outsider ruins, the chances of them encountering other dangers would greatly increase. After Consort Yu, Shueluo, Situ, Tianhe, Situ Qingyi, and the others also quickly entered the yellow sand-filled space. However, before the last person could enter, there was a sudden change. A yellow sand storm suddenly broke through the void, sucking in the 10 people who had just entered the space. It was obvious that they were unlucky because this yellow sandstorm was constantly sweeping through the entire space. It just so happened that the sandstorm was surging towards them, and they had no way to prepare in advance. Everyone instantly erupted with the power within their bodies and used their various defensive methods. The terrifying metal-type primordial force could instantly tear apart the physical body of a fifth-phase sovereign expert. Of course, this should be fine for the time being after using their defensive methods. Most importantly, there was still one person who hadn't entered. It was also at this moment that the last Yao cultivator appeared beside them, completely defenseless, and was swept into the opening storm. Chapter 1293. Caught off guard. The demonic cultivator who was swept into the storm was cut open from head to toe. However, he immediately reacted. A layer of lightning divine runes rapidly condensed around him, covering his entire body and blocking the violent storm of metal primordial power. "Run!" someone shouted. Everyone quickly retreated out of the storm. Fortunately, everyone's martial arts realm was not low. After using their defensive methods, they were able to resist the metal elemental primordial power storm for a while. Long Yu and Red Oriole were both in consort Yu's small world, observing the situation outside. They were thinking about what they could do if they encountered such a situation. Long Yu naturally had a way out. Whether it was turning into nothingness, entering the netherworld void Dragonblade space, or using the Book of Shadows to disguise himself and blend into the metal origin power storm. Of course, no matter which method he used, Long Yu would be able to leave the metal origin power storm unscathed. The only difference was how much energy he would have to expend. If he entered the netherworld void Dragonblade space, he could rely on the netherworld void Dragonblade's innate ability to help him escape. If he used the Book of Shadows, it would consume a lot more energy. Of course, the 9 Nether Hunter could also do it, but it would consume a lot more energy. If it wasn't for some special circumstances, he definitely wouldn't use the 9 Nether Hunters method to get through this difficult situation. All 11 people quickly retreated from the entrance area and headed deeper into the foreign race ruins. Soon, they finally escaped the metal origin power storm. The heavily injured demonic cultivator who entered last was heavily injured by the metal origin power storm. At this time, he was panting heavily as he followed behind everyone. After escaping from the storm, everyone had a moment to catch their breath. They should be safe for the time being. The probability of consecutive metal origin power storms breaking through the void and sweeping over was too small. Divine ability, universe reversal. Right at this time, one of the 6th-stage Sovereign Realm demonic cultivators used a healing divine ability on the heavily injured demonic cultivator. A burst of black and white divine runes condensed together, quickly covering the heavily injured beast cultivator's body, and then quickly healing all the injuries on his body. The Heaven and Earth Reversal Connate mystic ability was a complete healing mystic ability, so its effects were naturally excellent. There was no need for him to consume any healing pills, and he was able to fully recover from his injuries. The others weren't surprised by this scene, and they were used to it. On the other hand, Long Yu was slightly surprised because it was the first time he'd seen such a powerful divine ability of healing, and it had actually pulled that heavily injured demon cultivator back in just a few breaths of time. If he learned this healing divine art, how many healing pills could he save? If he used all of them to exchange for cultivation resources, the speed of his martial arts realm would be even faster. Long Yu didn't think too much about it, and the others didn't waste any more time. After the demonic cultivator was healed, he didn't say any words of gratitude. Everyone was here to explore the ancient foreign race ruins together, so words of gratitude could be saved for after leaving this place. As for now, they didn't have any time to waste. As far as the eye could see, the sky was filled with yellow sand formed by the metal elemental power of origin. It was raging and spreading throughout the entire space. Above their heads, below their feet, all around them were yellow sandstorms, and it was like a scene of the end of the world. In such an environment, everyone could only pass through the cracks of the sandstorms, and they had to be prepared at all times to prevent the sandstorms from suddenly shattering the void and directly appearing around them. Everyone was on full alert, and they didn't have the slightest bit of slack, because in such a dangerous place, a little carelessness could lead to their deaths. Not to mention these high-level sovereigns, even demigod powerhouses wouldn't dare to act recklessly in this foreign race ruins. The range of spiritual sense perception has been reduced a lot, and it's too dangerous to advance like this. Soon, someone said aloud in a low voice. Obviously, in this area surrounded by yellow sandstorms, there was no way to detect the scene too far away, so he didn't feel safe. Yes, I have a few elixirs here that can enhance the strength of spiritual sense perception. Among us, whoever has the strongest spiritual sense perception, take these elixirs. After taking them, they'll be effective for a day. Someone contributed a few elixirs. Hearing this, Long Yu's heart moved, and he exchanged a glance with Red Oriole, and they nodded at each other. Soon, Long Yu's figure came out of Consort Yu's small world. He didn't say much, and he raised his hand to display the balanced light, the pinnacle of martial arts' secret techniques. As the balanced light flickered continuously, it blessed all 11 people in the field, and these high-level sovereigns were immediately shocked. What kind of ability was this? It actually increased the strength of their spiritual sense perception by at least 10 times. Amazing, huh? I didn't expect you to have such a method, kid. You've helped us a lot. The white-haired young man laughed. The strange thing was that even when this guy was speaking, his presence was very weak, and he didn't even attract the attention of others. The Ice Bear Demon clans Situ Tianhe and Situ Qingyi glanced at Long Yu strangely, but they discovered that Long Yu didn't stay outside for too long. After casting the balanced light on them, he returned to Consort Yu's small world. After all, it was too dangerous outside. If the metal elemental Genesis power storm suddenly blew over, Long Yu wouldn't be able to block it in time, and he would die. As for the change in other people's impression of him, of course, it wasn't as important as his own life. After the balanced light's effect, everyone's spiritual sense perception increased by a level, and the range of their perception range increased by 3 to 5 times. Although the strength of their spiritual sense had increased by 10 times, the range of their spiritual sense detection was also affected when the metal elemental Genesis power storm was wreaking havoc everywhere. This was because the storm could greatly block their spiritual sense detection. However, with the increase of 3 to 5 times, their situation was still much better than before. At least they could find some paths that led deeper into the alien ruins. Let's go this way. Soon, Consort Yu made a decision. She had the highest martial Dao realm. She was a 7th-stage great sovereign, and she also graduated from a demigod academy. In addition, she was already talented in spiritual sense detection. So after casting the balanced light, her spiritual sense detection was definitely the strongest among them, and even several times stronger than the others. The others trusted Consort Yu's spiritual sense detection ability quite a bit, so that they didn't have any different opinions. Everyone followed Consort Yu and slowly moved in the direction she pointed. I didn't expect you to help us so much so quickly. Consort Yu secretly sent a message to Long Yu with a smile. After all, Long Yu was in her small world, so it was easy for her to secretly communicate with Long Yu. I feel like this is not the only help I can offer this time. Long Yu smiled shamelessly, without the slightest hint of modesty. Then I look forward to your performance. Consort Yu chuckled, then said, There's an Eye of a Storm not far from where we're going. It should be safer around there, so let's rest there first. She didn't just say this to Long Yu, but also to everyone in the team. The Eye of a Storm was also commonly known as the center of the storm. In this ancient foreign race ruin, there was so much violent and turbulent metal-type primordial power, so naturally there was a place where it gathered, and that was the Eye of the Storm. Although the Eye of the Storm was where the storm gathered, it wasn't the most dangerous place. Instead, it was the safest place because the area around the Eye of the Storm was absolutely empty, and the metal-type primordial power storm would be absorbed by the Eye of the Storm when it approached it. By relying on their own cultivation, they were able to easily resist the suction from the Eye of the Storm from a certain distance away. No one objected to Consort Yu's decision. The 11 of them followed each other closely as they passed through the yellow sandstorm that was condensed from the metal-type primordial power. None of them dared to fall behind in such a place, because it might mean death. Although Consort Yu's spiritual consciousness was very strong and had been enhanced by the balanced light, she could only detect things that were 50 kilometers away at most. The Eye of the Storm was about 100 miles away. Since they had found a safe place like the Eye of the Storm, they didn't need to conserve their energy for the time being. All of them maintained their defensive abilities or martial techniques as they rapidly advanced in the direction of the Eye of the Storm. During this time, the metal elemental primordial force swept past them a few times, completely enveloping the 11 of them. However, because they were all in a defensive state, none of them were injured. They had only used up some of their energy. This energy could be quickly replenished once they were near the eye of the storm, so they did not panic too much. Soon, a yellow sandstorm that connected the sky and the earth appeared in front of everyone. It was the center of all the terrifying storms in this void. It looked like a tornado that occupied a large space in front of them. The center of the tornado was relatively small, but the top and bottom were extremely vast. There was almost no end to it, and it formed the sky and ground in this void. Whether they looked up or down, all they could see was the boundless yellow sandstorm. Fortunately, everything was calm near the eye of the storm. Not only was there no storm, but there was also nothing else. Perhaps there was only the relatively weak suction from the eye of the storm itself, but that wasn't a problem for everyone. Let's go and rest first. I've detected a yellow sand palace 50 kilometers away. It's time for us to reap our harvest, but we have to plan everything carefully. Chapter 1294. Near the Eye of the Storm. In this doomsday-like scene, the 11 of them had a moment to catch their breath and recover their strength. The Yellow Sand Palace is about 100 kilometers away from here. If we force our way there, it will be quite exhausting. Maybe we should find a few people to explore the situation first. Situ Tianha of the Ice Bear Demon clan said in a low voice. After all, everyone knew how dangerous it was to be the first to explore a place like the ancient outsider race's ruins. In fact, it was a good idea, but Situ Tianha obviously didn't want to explore the way himself. Therefore, the others felt uncomfortable when he said that. But at this time, no one would care too much. Consort Yu also nodded. From the perspective of safety, we should indeed have someone explore the way first. Then who will go? That's the most important question. If they had a choice, they believed that no one would be willing to explore the way because it was too dangerous. If they encountered any trouble, they wouldn't even have the chance to call for help. Therefore, after Consort Yu asked the question, no one answered her for a while. Then, an unexpected voice came. If no one wants to go, then I'll go. I'll go alone. If it's just a metal elemental absolute beginning storm, it won't be much trouble for me. As the voice came into everyone's ears, Long Yu's figure came out of Consort Yu's little world. He wasn't spouting nonsense. He had the Nether Void Dragon Blade, so he could freely pass through the 5 elemental energy whirlpools. Needless to say, these metal elemental energy whirlpools were also unimpeded. Red Oriole knew what he was capable of. The Void Spirit Dragon Dagger was a powerful absolute beginning divine grade weapon that had been smelted in the absolute beginning furnace. It was definitely more powerful than any other weapon, but the others didn't know what Long Yu was capable of. Therefore, even Shui Luo and Yu Fei were a little surprised that Long Yu would actually take the initiative to go out and explore. They felt that it was a little unbelievable. Are you serious? Shui Luo looked at Long Yu solemnly. Of course. Rest assured, I've done the same thing against the 3 demigods of the Ice God clan. Long Yu said with a chuckle. His words reminded the others of the miraculous existence that had once held back 3 demigods of the Ice God clan when he had just entered the ruler's secret realm. Up to you. Even if you don't succeed, we won't lose anything anyway. The Ice Bear Demon clan's woman, Situ Qingyi, said lightly. She didn't have a good impression of Long Yu for taking the initiative to explore. On the contrary, she felt that this kid was too arrogant and might get them killed. In such a situation, it would be fine if this kid died when he went out to explore. It might not be a bad thing for them. Situ Qingyi and Situ Tianha had discussed it before. They both believed that Long Yu was only able to stall the 3 demigods of the Ice God clan because of sheer luck. As for the fact that Long Yu had any special abilities, they certainly didn't believe it. If Long Yu could really fight against demigods, wouldn't he be invincible? If it happened to Consort Yu, who was a 7th phase ruler, they would believe that it was due to strength. But for Long Yu, they would only think that it was luck. That was why they had such an impression of Longyu. Little brother, it's fine that you want to explore. Your courage is admirable. But what's with your tone? Situ Chingy's words made the others a little unhappy. The one who was unhappy was the white-haired young man who was also a human like Longyu, Little White. The white-haired young man did not have a strong presence, and everyone would even subconsciously ignore him. However, his words at this moment immediately caused the atmosphere to become tense. Obviously, Little White was targeting Situ Chingy. She also said disdainfully, "Explore it yourself if you have the ability. Others did what you didn't want to do for you, but not only did you not feel grateful, you even ridiculed them. Is this the so-called Ice Bear Demon Clan's expert? What a joke. Cut the crap. Am I wrong?" Situ Chingy retorted coldly. Of course, she couldn't stand someone targeting her like this. No matter what the cause was, she couldn't stand Little White's words. "Both of you cut it out." Longyu couldn't help but feel a headache when he saw them quarreling. He stood up and said, "I don't care what you think of me and Red Oriole, but I don't want to die here. If you want to quarrel, wait until we leave here. Senior, thank you for speaking up for me. But I'm fine, so don't bother with these petty people." Although these words weren't specifically targeted at Situ Chingy, the word petty stung her again. She glanced at Longyu and said in a cold tone, "Be careful what you say. If we weren't in these alien ruins, I would have killed you for what you said." "You could try." Little White laughed. "Do you really think the young geniuses of the human race are easy to bully? If you want to do anything to him, I'll turn against you right now." "All right, I can't be bothered to say more. I'm leaving. Wait for my news." Longyu smiled at the white-haired young man. He had a good impression of him. He then glanced at Situ Chingy and Situ Tianhe, the so-called experts of the Ice Bear Demon race, and turned to leave. The contempt in Longyu's eyes greatly annoyed Situ Chingy and Situ Tianhe. What qualifications did this kid have to look down on two fifth-stage sovereigns? The other demonic cultivator who had cultivated the heaven and earth reversal healing ability couldn't bear to watch this any longer. He chuckled and said, "Situ, could it be that the two of you have fallen to the point where you can only bicker with juniors? Mind your own business." Situ Chingy glared at the beast cultivator and said no more. For Longyu, the conflict just now was nothing more than a small one. It didn't affect his mood. Right now, all of his thoughts were focused on exploring the path to the Yellow Sand Palace. Along the way, there were countless metal elemental genesis power storms, and there might even be other unknown hidden dangers. He had no choice but to go all out and be cautious. Fortunately, he had the Void Underworld Dragon Blade, so he was quite confident in his ability to explore the path. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken a risk to explore the path. Soon, Longyu had Little Void head in the direction of the Yellow Sand Palace that Consort you had found, while he himself entered Little Void's internal space. The Void Underworld Dragon Blade turned into a streak of light blue light and quickly flew towards the Yellow Sand Palace, quickly disappearing from everyone's sight. Red Oriole, Shueluo, and Consort you all looked worried. However, the white-haired human young man, Little White, chuckled and said, "Since he dares to step forward, he must have some confidence. Don't worry too much, just wait for his news." Red Oriole nodded. "That's true. If even he can't pass through this path safely, then there's no need to mention the rest of us, especially some despicable people." Red Oriole's words were also because she couldn't stand the Ice Bear Demon Clan. Just now, Longyu had torn all pretense of cordiality with them, so she couldn't be bothered to maintain any respect for them. These words made Situ Chingy's face turn purple. She had never thought that she would be ridiculed and looked down upon by two juniors today. She still wanted to say something to deal with Red Oriole, but after glancing at Shueluo, she gave up. She could only think to herself, for Shueluo's sake, "I can't be bothered to bicker with a little girl like you." After Longyu left, the people who stayed behind didn't make much of a fuss. As for Longyu, he was alone. Soon, he entered a storm of metal elemental primordial power in the Nether Dragon Blade. Little Void felt much more relaxed now than when he was at the edge of the space-time tunnel. Without much pressure, the void underworld dragon blade turned into a stream of light and quickly crossed a distance of dozens of miles. Then, it finally encountered an accident. The metal-type primordial storm was no threat to the void underworld dragon blade, but at this time, what appeared in front of Long Yu and Little Void was a layer of space barrier. This layer of space barrier was incomparably vast, reaching up to the yellow sand sky and down to the yellow sand earth. It lay in front of Long Yu, as if it separated the entire foreign ruins into two different parts. And this space barrier was also very strange. It didn't block other forces, but it blocked existences with consciousness from passing through. In front of the space barrier, there was no metal-type primordial storm occupying it, so Long Yu came out of the void underworld dragon blade and tested the space barrier. Ordinary objects wouldn't be blocked by the space barrier, so it was easy for Long Yu to throw some useless things to the other side of the barrier. But neither the void underworld dragon blade nor Long Yu could pass through this space barrier. Long Yu found that it was because of the existence of consciousness, not only Little Void's self-consciousness, but also Long Yu's consciousness. It was something he couldn't avoid no matter what. The purpose of this space barrier was to stop existences with consciousness from passing through. We've already advanced for more than 70 miles. The Yellow Sand Palace should not be far ahead. I wonder if there are other space barriers like this ahead, Long Yu thought to himself. Now, of course, he wanted to pass through this space barrier. He could choose to use the path of 9 underworlds to disintegrate this space barrier. After all, the power that formed this barrier wasn't as advanced as the water-type primordial storm, so Long Yu could definitely disintegrate it slowly. But before that, he still tried other methods. At the very least, he had to understand the characteristics of this space barrier. I can pass through the 9 underworld hunter, but if I enter the 9 underworld hunter, I won't be able to pass through. I'll be bounced back. Little Void can't pass through in the small world. So even if I'm in the small world, I can't pass through. Looks like there's no other way. The only way is to break this barrier. But will there be any danger? Chapter 1295. After thinking about it, Long Yu couldn't think of any other way. Then, he activated the path of 9 underworlds and prepared to disintegrate the consciousness barrier formed by the spatial divine characters. This was not a difficult task for him. First, Long Yu blessed himself with the light of equalization, which allowed him to sense the situation within a 5-mile radius. Although this range was far from Consort Yu's detection range, it was still useful for him now. Due to the existence of the metal elemental absolute beginning power storm, the range of everyone's spiritual senses was weakened to the extreme. It was already not bad for Long Yu to be able to sense the situation within a 5-mile radius. Then, the path of 9 underworlds with the power of the spatial essence instantly bombarded the layer of consciousness barrier and began to disintegrate it. At this time, Long Yu was constantly paying attention to the situation around him. Once there was any abnormality, he would take measures. He could either enter the void nether dragon blade and escape, or hide in the 9 underworlds prison tablet. These were the only 2 things he could do. If he encountered danger, he could only choose one of the 2. Fortunately, when the layer of consciousness barrier was disintegrated, nothing abnormal happened. However, the layer of consciousness barrier was not very sturdy. Under the constant erosion of the path of 9 underworlds, it disintegrated much faster than the water elemental absolute beginning power barrier. However, it was more powerful, so it took a long time to disintegrate. Long Yu was very nervous. Although he was close to the space barrier, this barrier could only block consciousness. It couldn't block the metal elemental absolute beginning power storm from sweeping over here. Now that he was going to use the path of 9 underworlds to disintegrate the space barrier, he couldn't hide in the void nether dragon blade. He could only appear outside and expose himself in the dangerous void of the alien ruins. Yellow sand constantly blew past him, and it contained the power of the metal origin. On a small scale, it was like a light breeze, and it didn't have much destructive power. However, It was a constant reminder to Long Yu that this place wasn't absolutely safe. Hurry, hurry, disintegrate this layer of barrier. Long Yu was anxious, but he did not panic. He knew that the more nervous he was, the more careful he should be. If he accidentally messed up, then the problem would be really big. Fortunately, Long Yu's luck seemed to be pretty good. After the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, Long Yu did not encounter any special situation. After this period of time, Long Yu finally broke down the layer of the space barrier, creating a gap that allowed him to enter. Little Sue, let's go. Long Yu didn't hesitate. When the power of the path of the 9 underworlds pierced through the spatial barrier, he entered the netherworld dragon blade again and let it pass through the gap. Everything went smoothly. Long Yu was overjoyed. Then, he carefully observed the situation around him. For the time being, there was no danger. He successfully passed through the spatial consciousness barrier and approached the so-called Yellow Sand Palace that Consort you had detected. For the Netherworld Dragon Blade, the distance of 30 kilometers was covered in the blink of an eye. Before long, Long Yu saw a yellow sand palace in the void in the distance. It was about the same size as the 9 Underworlds tablet, and it was floating in the void that was filled with yellow sand. It was clear that there was a defensive barrier around the palace. Even the sandstorm created by the metal element absolute beginning power couldn't penetrate that defensive barrier. Long Yu didn't dare to touch it casually. After all, he was already close to the building of the foreign race, and an accident could happen if he was not careful. He only observed from afar. Then, he recorded what he observed in a spiritual imprint. Then, Long Yu turned around and left. You mean, there are 2 statues like this at the entrance of the Yellow Sand Palace? When Long Yu returned to the vicinity of the Eye of the Storm, he showed the image recorded in the spiritual imprint to the others. Then, everyone frowned when they saw the image. Many people were obviously a little surprised that Long Yu could return safely, especially the 2 Ice Bear demons. But they didn't say much. After all, Long Yu had made a contribution to the whole team. If Situ Qingyi dared to say anything now, it would probably cause public outrage. So, all their attention was focused on the image of Long Yu's spiritual imprint. In this scene, what appeared was the yellow sand palace that Long Yu had seen. At the entrance of the palace, there were 2 yellow sand statues, both of which had appearances that most people had never seen before. It was a creature that looked like a slender bamboo pole. On the bamboo pole, there were many translucent yellow sand wings. These wings were so huge that even the bamboo pole of the creature was difficult to see under the cover of dozens of pairs of wings. The multi-winged clan. The white-haired youth, Xiao Bai, said faintly, "This alien race once invaded the territories of our demon race and human race 40 million years ago. However, the invaders were all wiped out by us. Until now, there are no records of where the multi-winged clan came from. I didn't expect this alien ruin to belong to the multi-winged clan." The multi-winged clan? Long Yu's heart skipped a beat. He was a little shocked when he looked at the 2 statues. If the individual size of the multi-winged clan was similar to the 2 statues, then each individual of the multi-winged clan was equivalent to the size of hundreds of humans. Of course, the main reason was that their translucent yellow sand wings were too big and wide. Moreover, there were dozens of pairs of wings that overlapped each other, making it impossible to count them clearly. As for the true body of the multi-winged clan, that tiny bamboo-like body was probably negligible. Speaking of which, this form was a little similar to the dragonflies that Long Yu had seen in the past. However, the size ratio of the wings to the body was much more exaggerated. It wasn't impossible to say that the multi-winged race was completely made of wings. Even if they were just yellow sand statues, one could see some power-stored veins on those translucent yellow sand wings. It could be seen that those wings weren't for decoration, but were similar to the limbs of a human. You're quite knowledgeable. Concubine, you looked at the white-haired young man in surprise and praised him. I usually read more records, so I know more about the species of alien races than ordinary people. If you want to deal with this kind of multi-winged race, it's said that you have to shatter the bamboo body that is wrapped in countless wings. Whitey nodded and chuckled. However, Just like our human spine, the bamboo pole's body is heavily protected. The bamboo pole's body is the source of the multi-winged clan's power, and those wings are their combat methods. Not only are their attacks powerful, but their defense is also watertight. Now, there definitely won't be any living multi-winged clan in this ancient alien race ruin. What's the point of saying it so clearly? Why don't we go there earlier and see what treasures are in the Yellow Sand Palace? Situ Tianhe glanced at everyone and said. His gaze paused on Long Yu for a while, but he did not say anything about Long Yu. Although there won't be any living multi-winged clan, it's never wrong to understand their combat methods and weaknesses, Whitey said faintly. Besides, even if there aren't any living multi-winged clan, there might be some Dharma arrays and the like. These are all built according to the characteristics of the multi-winged clan. Are you sure you don't want to learn more about this alien race? Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Nobody dared to be negligent. They naturally had to listen carefully to what Little White had to say. Even Situ Tianhe didn't want to miss out on a single word that Little White said. This was because at a critical moment, one of his words might save everyone's lives. Of course, the multi-winged clan was an invasive species from 40 million years ago after all. Moreover, they had only appeared once in the territories of the humans and demons. Therefore, there were not many records about this alien race. Even though Whitey had memorized everything, there was not much useful information for everyone. Fortunately, the information that Whitey knew about the internal structure of the multi-winged clan's Yellow Sand Palace was still useful, so they had a little understanding of the situation in the Yellow Sand Palace. Of course, if they really wanted to know the situation inside, they would have to enter it themselves. Of course, this had nothing to do with Long Yu. After all, if they wanted to explore the interior of the Yellow Sand Palace, Long Yu would definitely not participate. Even if he went in, he would stay in Consort Yu's small world. Soon, Whitey finished what it wanted to say, and everyone prepared to set off under Consort Yu's lead. To prevent encountering danger near the palace, it's best for us to move together. Everyone will use defensive measures together to conserve energy as much as possible. Consort Yu said to everyone, "Why don't we come to the space inside my battle weapon? That way, no one will have to waste energy to resist the primordial force storm." Long Yu said to everyone with a smile. He then gestured to the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger. With this battle weapon, I can safely go back and forth in the primordial force storm without consuming any energy. Many people were tempted by his words. The space inside the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger was not Long Yu's small world. Inside the space, they would not have to worry about Long Yu being the Warlord and would not harm them. Instead, they would be able to pass through it easily. Why not? No problem. I'll be going in first. Shueluo was the most impolite. He laughed and directly entered the space inside the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger. Red Oriole nodded at Long Yu, then followed her elder brother into the cave. Let me borrow some light as well. The human youth, Whitey, also nodded at Long Yu with a smile and followed him into the space inside the Void Spirit Dragon Dagger. He did not suspect anything. The rest of the beast cultivators were a little hesitant. In fact, even if they forced their way through a distance of over 100 kilometers, they would only need to consume a tenth of their energy, no matter how unlucky they were. Chapter 1296. In the end, there were still 5 or 6 people who didn't choose the Nether Void Dragon Blade. They decided to rely on their defensive abilities to force their way through. Long Yu naturally wouldn't force them. No matter what they chose, Long Yu wouldn't suffer any loss. They would be the ones who would exhaust their energy. After making their choice, Consort Yu also entered the Nether Void Dragon Blade. Then, everyone set off in the direction of the Yellow Sand Palace. Only 5 people and the Nether Void Dragon Blade remained outside. They finally left the vicinity of the Eye of the Storm. The Yellow Sandstorm wreaked havoc in the void. Everyone moved forward at their fastest speed. They crossed the distance of 70 miles in the blink of an eye. Very soon, they were near the spatial consciousness barrier. Long Yu had already told them about this point. Therefore, everyone was prepared. They used their own abilities or entered their own small worlds to pass through the small gap that Long Yu had created. After all, they were all great sovereign realm experts. Although the small gap wasn't big enough to fit a human, they had their own methods to shrink their bodies or enter other small worlds or similar places. Very soon, they crossed 100 miles and arrived near the Yellow Sand Palace. All of them saw the scene recorded in Long Yu's true spirit imprint. Everyone continued forward, and soon, they safely passed through the defensive barrier. Finally, they heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that this defensive barrier could only block off the storm formed by the metal elemental Genesis power, but it would not stop them from advancing, as expected of the multi-winged race. In that case, we should be clear about the internal structure of the Yellow Sand Palace. Let's make a battle plan. Consort, you came out of the Nether Void Dragon Blade and commanded the overall situation. She discussed with Luo for a while and quickly made a decision on the operation. First, the exploration of the Yellow Sand Palace didn't require everyone to enter. Consort, you would lead the team, and 5 people would be enough. The others naturally had to stand guard outside the Yellow Sand Palace to prevent any accidents. After all, even Whitey had only seen them from ancient jade slips and had never personally encountered the multi-winged clan. Any accidents could happen. Those who stay outside cannot lose contact with those who enter the palace. They must be connected at all times. Leave this to me. The demonic cultivator who had unleashed the heaven and earth reversal and healing divine ability stepped forward and nodded to everyone. Long Yu noticed that this demonic cultivator was a white goat demonic cultivator. He was an old man at the 5th stage sovereign realm. After transforming into human form, his white beard wrapped around his neck twice. Based on how the others addressed him, they all called him Elder Yang. Elder Yang clearly had some special methods. His head-on battle prowess wasn't great, but the innate divine abilities he used as support were extremely rare. For example, the previous Heaven and Earth twist was a healing mystic art that Long Yu had never seen before, and its effects were outstanding. And now, Elder Yang had his own way to maintain contact with the 2 groups of people who were guarding outside the hall. It had to be known that the interior of the Yellow Sand Hall definitely had some shielding methods. After entering, it was impossible to communicate with the people outside by relying on spiritual sense perception and divine sense. Under such circumstances, Elder Yang's usefulness was obvious. Divine ability, Soul Link. Elder Yang directly activated this divine ability. This innate divine ability could link himself with anyone else. This kind of connection was on the soul level, the deepest level of connection. The 2 people with a soul link would know all the secrets of the other party, and they would also expose all of their own secrets. Therefore, Elder Yang's divine ability was useless under normal circumstances because no one would be willing to expose all their secrets to others. If Long Yu and Red Oriole had such a relationship, Soul Link wouldn't be a problem. There were almost no secrets between them, and it wouldn't be a problem to know everything about the other party. However, Elder Yang's words didn't seem very suitable. After all, no one present had the closest relationship with Elder Yang. However, this problem didn't need Long Yu to worry about. I'll do it, someone quickly volunteered. It was a young demonic cultivator. He stepped forward and said to everyone, "My father and Elder Yang are sworn brothers. There won't be any problems with Elder Yang's soul link." All right. The others nodded and inwardly heaved a sigh of relief. In this case, there wouldn't be a problem in entering the hall and communicating with the 2 groups of people guarding outside. If they encountered any accidents, they would be able to react immediately. This would greatly increase everyone's chances of survival. Long Yu, you, and Red Oriole stay outside. Luo turned his head and nodded to the 2 of them. Of course, Long Yu and Red Oriole didn't have any objections. Their cultivation levels were too low, and it wasn't a good idea to risk entering the Yellow Sand Hall. Soon, everyone was assigned. Elder Yang and 2 other demonic experts, as well as Long Yu and Red Oriole. A total of 5 people would stay outside. The other 8 experts of the 11 would enter the Yellow Sand Hall together to explore its mysteries and try to find some treasures. Little White, Luo, Consort Yu, and the Ice Bear Man and Woman would also enter the Yellow Sand Hall. Everyone split into 2 groups to ensure there wouldn't be any slip-ups. Then Consort Yu and Little White took the lead and stepped into the Yellow Sand Hall. When they passed by the 2 statues of the multi-winged race, the 2 slowed down their footsteps and carefully observed the 2 statues. After making sure there were no disturbances, everyone entered in a single file. Long Yu and Red Oriole watched from the outside as they disappeared into the Yellow Sand Hall. They couldn't help but feel nervous. Elder Yang chuckled and said, "Don't worry, they're all elites among elites. If even they can get into trouble in this Yellow Sand Hall, then this ancient foreign race ruin isn't something we can touch at all. In fact, I, Old Yang, have never heard of such a foreign race ruin, haha." That's right. With so many 5th phase sovereigns, exploring most foreign race ruins shouldn't be a problem. The other demonic cultivator next to him also smiled with relief. One of the 2 demonic cultivators who stayed with Elder Yang was a fox immortal demonic race. He was a young man with an extremely seductive appearance. His skin and eyes were as graceful and charming as a woman's. He was a 5th phase sovereign who was proficient in innate techniques related to mental control. The other one was a burly man who was wearing a brown crystal armor. He had a stocky build and did not speak much. It seemed that he was related to the man and woman from the Violent Bear Demon Clan and was from a Violent Bear Demon Clan. However, in reality, the relationship between the Violent Bear demonic race and the Ice Bear demonic race wasn't very good. Perhaps they were of the same race a long time ago, but they were completely different now. There were even frequent conflicts between the 2 races. Fortunately, the burly man from the Violent Bear demonic race had always been taciturn. It seemed like he didn't want to have any conflicts with the others. "Boss Bear, it's been so long. Why do you still have such a bitter face?" The seductive young man from the Fox Immortal demonic race glanced at the burly man from the Violent Bear demonic race and chuckled. "We must have gained a lot this time. It's time to let go of the people and things of the past." Of course, Long Yu and Red Oriole didn't know what he was talking about. They could only listen from his side. It seemed like the burly man from the Violent Bear demonic race had encountered some misfortune. The burly man from the Violent Bear demonic race, who was addressed as Boss Bear, raised his head coldly and glanced at the young man from the Fox Immortal demonic race. Then, he snorted coldly. "If your woman dies in the hands of a foreign race, let's see if you can let it go. It's just a woman. Why bother? If one is gone, we could just find another one." "Ha!" The young man from the Fox Immortal demonic race laughed softly. He seemed to have a very different opinion for Boss Bear. Boss Bear didn't argue with him. However, it was obvious that he was still in a very bad mood. He was too lazy to say anything. However, these words allowed Long Yu and Red Oriole to understand some things. Of course, these things had nothing to do with them. However, both Long Yu and Red Oriole found it hard to accept what the young man from the Fox Immortal demonic race had said. If it was the woman he loved, how could he not keep her in his heart? If something were to happen to Red Oriole, Long Yu would likely be depressed for a long time, just like Boss Xiong, right? However, Long Yu was extremely determined. He couldn't let Red Oriole suffer any harm. Old Yang, Boss Bear, and the young man from the Fox Immortal demonic race, Su Yuqing, were the 3 demonic experts who stayed outside. The name Su Yuqing sounded like a woman's name, but in fact, he was indeed a man. They've gone in and haven't encountered anything for the time being. Let's not be too relaxed and be vigilant at all times. Through the spiritual link, Old Yang could communicate with his son on the spiritual level. Therefore, he knew very well what the situation was like after the other party entered the Yellow Sand Palace. Old Yang could even display the scene that everyone had encountered in the Yellow Sand Palace in a way similar to a spiritual inscription in front of Long Yu and the others, making them feel like they were there. Everyone's attention was focused on the scene inside the Yellow Sand Palace that Old Yang had displayed. At the same time, they were constantly vigilant of their surroundings. After all, this was not a safe place. Even if they entered the Yellow Sand Palace's defensive barrier, they might encounter other unexpected dangers. Consort Yu and Little White walked to the front. After entering the Yellow Sand Palace, they first encountered some winding yellow sand passageways. On both sides of the passageways were giant statues of the multi-winged race. The entire Yellow Sand Palace was covered in dust, and it was obvious that no one had come here for countless years. Suddenly, Consort Yu and the others seemed to have touched some kind of restriction as they advanced. All of a sudden, all of them felt that something was wrong. Be careful. Chapter 1297. Everyone was on high alert as they cautiously surveyed their surroundings. Inside the Yellow Sand Palace, Long Yu had previously buffed Consort Yu and the others with balance control, which could last for a long period of time, greatly increasing the strength of their spiritual senses and perception. However, what everyone did not expect was that after everyone inside the Yellow Sand Palace touched a certain restriction, the first thing that changed was actually outside the Yellow Sand Palace. Long Yu and the others carefully observed their surroundings and were constantly on guard. Suddenly, they discovered that a blue light suddenly flashed near the defensive barrier. Water-type primordial power. Everyone immediately exclaimed. Water-type primordial power had actually set up a spatial barrier around the Yellow Sand Palace. It seemed like it was going to prevent them from escaping. No wonder the defensive barrier did not stop them and allowed them to pass directly. It seemed like it was a trap. The situation outside was clearly transmitted to everyone inside the Yellow Sand Palace through Old Yang's soul link. Naturally, it made Consort Yu and the others speed up. If they triggered the restriction, danger might follow. Even if they could resist this kind of danger, it would be impossible for them to resist it forever. Therefore, the best thing to do now was to quickly take the good stuff in the Yellow Sand Palace and leave as soon as possible. Consort Yu and the others did not retreat. Instead, they went deeper into the Yellow Sand Palace. According to Little White's description of the characteristics of the multi-winged race's buildings, they continuously cracked certain formations in the buildings and advanced at a relatively fast speed. However, at this moment, the situation outside the Yellow Sand Palace became very bad. This was because within the layer of water-type primordial power condensed in the spatial barrier, metal-type primordial power began to condense and condensed into yellow sand statues in several places. These yellow sand statues were all in the shape of the multi-winged race. Their bamboo bodies were covered with dozens of pairs of translucent wings. At this moment, they seemed to have come alive and surrounded Old Yang and Long Yu and the others. Careful, they've started fighting. Boss Xiong, who had been silent all this time, finally revealed a trace of ruthlessness in his eyes. At this moment, there were 3 yellow sand winged stone statues closest to everyone. All of them had the combat strength of a 3rd or 4th phase dominator. Boss Bear alone was enough to deal with these 3 winged yellow sandstone statues. His burly body suddenly rushed out. Although he was as big as a hill, he was as fast as a cannonball, and his whole body crashed into one of the yellow sand-winged stone statues. The terrifying power of the Berserker's divine characters forged Boss Bear's entire body into a body of steel. As soon as he collided with it, the powerful force completely tore the dozens of pairs of translucent wings of the winged yellow sand statue into pieces. Immediately after, Big Bear smashed his fist towards the center of the stone statue, directly smashing the bamboo pole body into 2, easily dealing with the yellow sand-winged stone statue. The other 2 immediately surrounded Boss Bear from 2 different directions. However, Boss Bear's entire body was already in the Berserker's body, and his whole body was emitting a kind of courageous aura. Mere 3rd or 4th phase dominator strength, yellow, sand-winged stone statues could not cause any damage to him. He only needed to wave his fist and condense the Berserker's divine characters in his hand, and he could easily smash his opponents to pieces. However, What was worrying was that the number of yellow, sand-winged stone statues that were constantly flashing and condensing in the surroundings was increasing. In the distance, there were actually more than 10 of them flying over together. From different directions, a total of dozens of yellow sand-winged stone statues flew over. Although all of them had the strength of third or fourth phase dominators, it would be very troublesome if there were too many of them. The key problem was that no one knew how many yellow sand-winged stone statues would condense in total. Right now, there were only a few dozen, and it was still manageable. However, what if there were over 100 stone statues? It was fine if there were over 100, but what if there were hundreds or thousands of them? With just the 5 of them outside, it was impossible for them to get rid of hundreds or even thousands of yellow, sand-winged stone statues. Most importantly, Long did not have any combat strength at all, and Red Oriole would not be able to play a decisive role in a battle of this level. Of course, Red Oriole could still get rid of a few yellow sand-winged stone statues, but compared to a barbarian like Big Bear, her killing speed would be more than 100 times slower. The Fox Immortal demonic race youth named Su Yuqing naturally could not stay idle at this time. He floated in another direction. Compared to Big Bear, Su Yuqing's methods were much better. He casually waved his hand, and the power of peach-red divine characters spread out, condensing into a faint peach-red mist that enveloped the dozen or so winged yellow sandstone statues in that direction. Immediately after, the pink mist burrowed into the yellow sand statues. After 2 breaths of time, all the pink mist exploded. The yellow sand-winged stone statues directly exploded along with the fog, and not a single trace was left behind. These yellow sand-winged stone statues are condensed through the power of the formation, and their numbers are increasing. If we want to stop them, we must find the formation eye. Otherwise, we will definitely be finished. Elder Yang's face sank, and he looked around. When he saw that the yellow sand-winged stone statues were not decreasing, but were instead increasing in number, he immediately said solemnly, "Elder Yang, I'll leave it to you. First, find out where the formation eye is." Long Yu's heart thumped. When he heard Elder Yang's words, he did not hesitate and immediately activated the balance control secret technique, blessing Elder Yang with the balanced light. Among everyone present, Red Oriole's spiritual awareness was not the strongest. Even if she cultivated the balance control secret technique, she was still inferior to Elder Yang's level. After all, Elder Yang had the strength of a 5th-stage ruler, and he also cultivated a technique that strengthened spiritual awareness. This white goat demon cultivator old man had a lot of auxiliary techniques that could always be used at any time. Elder Yang used his own method to strengthen his spiritual sense perception. After combining it with the light of equalization, the strength of his spiritual sense perception immediately reached an unbelievable level. It had even reached the level of Yu Fei. At this moment, Elder Yang's spiritual awareness enveloped the entire space around the Yellow Sand Palace, and then he carefully probed. However, just the enhancement of spiritual awareness was not as good as the detection effect of the balance control secret technique. It was not that easy for Elder Yang to find a formation that was constantly condensing the stone statues. Hold on, we will find the formation eye soon, and then we will destroy it together, Elder Yang said in a deep voice, and his spiritual awareness constantly probed the surrounding area. Su Yuqing and Ba Xiong were in 2 different directions, resisting the yellow sand-winged stone statues that were constantly attacking. These stone statues were completely condensed from metal-type origin power, and they were definitely not weak. Unfortunately, they encountered Demon Clan elites like Ba Xiong and Su Yuqing, so they could not fight at all. However, the problem was that the number of opponents was increasing. "Hurry up, I'm about to be surrounded." Ba Xiong's deep voice came out, attracting Long Yu's attention. He discovered that over 30 yellow sand-winged stone statues had surrounded Ba Xiong, and it was almost airtight. Ba Xiong could break out of the encirclement with all his strength now, and break out of the encirclement while smashing some stone statues along the way. However, It was uncertain what would happen after a while. If this doesn't work, I can only go into the Yellow Sand Palace. Su Yuqing gritted his teeth. His group attack method was powerful, and he did not face the same situation as Boss Xiong. However, his consumption was quite large, and if this continued, he would soon exhaust his strength. Those yellow sand-winged stone statues were not living creatures at all, and were not afraid of death at all. They attacked with all their strength. Although they were only at the level of a third or fourth stage ruler, the power they released was metal-type origin power, and its destructive power was still very terrifying. Entering the Yellow Sand Palace is not a good idea. They are not in a good situation right now, Elder Yang said solemnly. Then he thought for a while and said, "Wait for me to find the formation eye and destroy it first. Then I'll receive the others in the palace. They are about to reach the center of the entire palace. No matter what, find a formation eye first." Boss Bear snapped. The divine runes of Berserker burst out once again, condensing into a frenzied whirlwind that actually enveloped the 30-odd winged stone statues in the surroundings. The terrifying, destructive power of the whirlwind arrived with a loud rumble, completely shattering the stone statues into pieces. "All right, found it, follow me." Elder Yang suddenly roared with an excited expression, and then his body turned into the true form of a white goat demon cultivator. He stepped on a white cloud and flew towards a direction near the Yellow Sand Palace. Boss Xiong and Su Yuqing looked at each other, and each prepared to break out of the encirclement in the direction Elder Yang was heading. As for Long Yu and Red Oriole, they naturally followed closely behind Elder Yang, flying towards the direction he had detected. Very soon, they were close, and even Long Yu could feel that there was some power condensing in front of them. It was most likely the formation eye. The formation eye could not be discovered by the naked eye. Even with spiritual sense, one would need to control it evenly to discover a trace of it. It was really not easy for Elder Yang to discover the formation eye. There is a spatial defensive barrier around the formation eye. Destroy the spatial barrier first, Elder Yang said in a low voice. He raised his hand and released a burst of white light. Light-type divine runes suddenly arrived and directly destroyed two yellow sand-winged stone statues that were approaching them. "I can deal with the spatial barrier." Red Oriole, Elder Yang, cover me. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.